Hello, hello, hello. You are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. I am Daragh, this is Shane.
Hello.
Two brothers talking all things rugby from the perspective of Leinster and Ireland. We have a big show in store for you. This is number 81.
This is, yeah.
We're getting on. We're trucking very, very slowly towards that
century.
Century, yeah. I know we were a little late this week. We were sort of pushed back, so it's Thursday afternoon as we're shooting this, so we'll be hopefully getting to this. You're getting this Friday, obviously, with a day in advance of Super Saturday, and it is a Super Saturday this Saturday, and perhaps more super than they ever were.
Yes.
6-month delay, obviously, from the end of the Six Nations, but we have it coming up. 3 matches, 3 teams capable of winning the tournament. What more could you want? Well, there's a Bledisloe Cup match in the morning if you aren't wetted enough in terms of your appetite
indeed.
for it.
So it's a super duper Saturday with that included.
It's a phenomenal Saturday, and yeah, we're going to be previewing all of those games, going through them in as much detail as we can, obviously, feasibly, in the space of however long we're going to be doing this. And then we're also going to cover all the other rugby that's going on in sort of briefer context. We're going to be looking back on the Premiership final. We're going to be looking at the Women's Six Nations, the South American Four Nations, which wrapped up over the weekend. That was very exciting. Uruguay's autumn test against Spain. We have the Bermuda 10s that we're going to take a look at. And of course domestic rugby as well. Super Rugby Unlocked in South Africa, the Top Tours and the Pro 14. And when we get through all that, we'll be wrapping up the show with the rugby news of the week.
That's right. So yeah, a marathon show. But if it's your first time here, hello, you're very welcome. If a returning subscriber, then welcome back. But if you are new here, then please do like and subscribe if you enjoy this rugby content, and ring the bell to be notified when we upload our shorter vids as well. And leave a comment as well. That's what we try to encourage here. We like to have a good clean discourse in the comments, and we love to hear your opinions on the matter as well. So yeah, that's absolutely it. So without further ado, we're going to start the show with a look at Super Saturday as we build it. It is a tremendous Saturday in the Six Nations, and there's a whole host of permutations and great games and great fixtures. Obviously, the main one really that everyone's looking at is Ireland-France, but that's kind of the last one. That's going to be the last game of the tournament. So we're going to start we're just going to run through them in chronological order, which would have us starting with Wales v Scotland, which is going to take place on Saturday at 2:15, the curtain raiser for the whole Super Saturday that is. And then usually it's going to be in Páirc Uí Scarlets in Clonethley, which is quite an unusual place for a Six Nations game, but then similar to the Champions Cup final a few weeks ago in Ashton Gate, you can do it there because there's no fans going to be in attendance.
Well, so it's true, but it is an interesting factor and an interesting dynamic, the location. Wales obviously used to the Millennium Stadium where you can close the roof, and while weather forecasts are by no means an exact science, it is by some accounts at least going to be a wet and windy one on Saturday, and that is going to affect the game
for sure. Just in other things about it, Andrew Brace is the referee for that one. I suppose we'll get into the colour of the game, because there's a lot to, even though it's kind of a dead rubber in the context of the competition, just the delay in the staggered nature of the season means that these teams are kind of starting their season with the Autumn Nations Cup coming up rather than finishing it, even though it is the finish to the Six Nations. So it has a lot to play for both of these teams, just in terms of building that momentum into a new tournament this autumn. Yeah,
100%. I mean, you look at this from Wales's point of view, this game takes on a massive significance. It is, as you say, the start of their season, but the PVAC era has gotten off to a pretty
rocky start.
You're not looking a good start now after an opening day win against Wales. The sort of imperious defensive mindset that sort of characterised the Sean Edwards Warren Gatland team of last year more or less disintegrated overnight, and very few residuals of it were left, and now they've lost. They found themselves getting into shootout games with top teams. Ireland Ireland was one of the lower scoring ones, but England as well, France as well, twice, and lost all 4 of them.
To be fair, a little like his Scarlets outfit prior to them, and this will take place in Páirc Uí Scarlets, where, as you say, they've been managing to create shootouts, which it was no different in the friendly game against France the other week. It looked like another shootout, and it was just one that they lost, and that's been happening to them quite a lot. Yeah, their defence from being so stout and so resilient and so adaptable, they were the team that kind of stalled into a stalemate with the now world champion South Africans in the semi-final. and we're very close to winning that game as well, based entirely on their defence. Certainly from an Irish point of view, we used to struggle mightily to try and break them down because of their tackling, and they're just very, very clever defensive reads, specifically in the Northern Hemisphere as well. Sometimes there were doubts about their 13 channel, but we didn't really test them there. But now that has been replaced by a completely new look with a lot of the same players, but just a completely different style, different tempo of game, very little control from halfbacks. Just they don't seem to be able to get a handle on the game.
Certainly, the incumbent selection of Rhys Webb and Dan Biggar, which was the two that were going into it before this game, were struggling a little for form, and we're definitely struggling to control the game. I think they had issues, generally speaking, with game management, defence, obviously, and the tight five as well, that would be in an urgent need of addressing. And that is one of the key factors that they'll be looking at going into this game in terms of improving their squad. But also just, you can't, like, going 1-5 on the season to win against.
Suddenly Pivac's position's under pressure with that. You can't have a year like
that. He's got a Nations Cup group coming up with England and Ireland in it. If those two games are lost as well, Wavak is going to be under massive pressure. Pivac, I should say. Wavak. He's going to be under massive pressure going into next year, and that's just not something that Wales need. I think there's nuggets and shoots of goodness to them. They can still take a try, but fixing their issues and certainly beating Scotland, they have a good home record against Scotland, should be enough to dial them in and not have the season spiral on them as old Welsh teams have done.
Yes, it's true. But then just to pivot from Scotland's point of view in terms of the colour of this game, things are kind of surprisingly upbeat considering where they were 12 months ago in the World Cup.
I would even said 6 months ago. Well, maybe not 6 months ago. Whatever bleeding month it is this year, who knows? But back in February, they were coming off that horrific situation in the World Cup where they've been knocked out by Japan. They kind of embarrassed themselves in other ways. Stuffed by Ireland, well beaten by Japan. When it looked like the Japanese game was going to be called off, they were sticking the chests out and calling lawsuits and everything else. And we were like, "What? Relax, all right. We're going to play the game." And I think they ended up charging one of their executives or one of their directors who were giving out the beans about World Rugby. I think they ended up sanctioning them in some way for doing that.
It was a pretty disastrous campaign from top to bottom.
They went and lost that game, and then at the very start of this year, Gregor Townsend looked like he was on his way out. Finn Russell had a falling out with him and was dropped from the squad, far and away the best player that they have in their squad. He was out of situation. Gregor decided, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to put all my faith in Stuart Hogg. I'm going to make him captain. He's going to be my star. He's going to rescue the season. And then 2 games against Ireland and England. What an awful schedule to have to start a season and a World Cup cycle with. Both of which they played very well, but 2 key errors from Captain Hogg cost them the wins in those games, or at least push those games beyond their reach. And things look to be thoroughly in the doldrums 2 weeks in.
But then they managed to dig it out of the fire. A great win against France. And just they've managed now, certainly coming off last week with Finn back in the picture. A new attacking dimension is in there, but then really where the news is at is in their tight five situation, like the depth they have. We were waiting to start the shoot of this podcast, waiting for the squads to come out, and just like having a read of that Scotland squad, it's a completely different outfit in tight. Like Rory Sutherland has come off bullying both the English, like Sinclair and Furlong in Ireland and England.
Rory Sutherland is taking absolute names. I mean, I think he can comfortably put the Irish, English and Georgian scrum as having been put in his back pocket and bested in 3 games this season. I mean, he's absolutely taking names. He's come in and it feels like the pivot from Scotland having a tight five that couldn't really compete with the top teams to one that's as good as any of them has happened suddenly. And it's just sort of been triggered and snowballed by the arrival back of Rory Sutherland, who had a long-term injury for so long, but he's come back in and he looks in incredible form, and he looks like he has the potential to become the best loose head in the world, and that's big talk. But he's not there yet, but he's close. He has the potential, I would say, at least to get there. And then, we've always known that they had good locks who could take the step up, knocking around. You got Skinner,
you have Grays, you have
Cummings, then you had Gilchrist and Toulis, who were the incumbents from Edinburgh for so long, and you had the 2 Gray brothers. usually many of them were injured or are out of form.
Yeah.
And this year they've come into it in stellar form, and they've got Ollie Kebble now qualified and coming into the team.
That's right.
Like,
yeah.
The depth is actually staggering in that tight 5 area, and they were comfortably competing in wet and hard games, especially the one in Murrayfield against England. They were not bested up front there. They were kind of outsmarted.
Yeah.
But in that game, they matched the English pack. In the Irish game, they matched the Irish pack. In the French game, they bested the French pack. So this is a forward pack that's very, very comfortable, operating at a high level with a lot of physicality. They weren't bothered at all by Georgia last week.
No, they were not. And like this will also be a good one to try and get a feather in their cap. It is a dead rubber, but historically they have a terrible record in Wales in terms of just getting one over on their neighbours there. So this is a good chance for them to put their hands up and do it. And another one I see you have here, Scotland haven't won 3 games in a row in the Six Nations since 1996. Which would be a nice thing to scrub out as a stat.
It would.
Because, like, whatever about Grand Slams, you can't win a Grand Slam without 3 games in a row, and they haven't won 3 games in a row in the comp since 96. That's
since before I was born.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I would have been born that autumn.
Yeah. So between that and the warm-up for the Autumn Nations, I think both teams will have a lot to play for. 100%. Wales will take confidence from their home record against their neighbours, feeling they have one up, but Scotland will feel like they have a bit more momentum to take in
100%.
And will be targeting the game too.
Yeah, and can finish as high as 3rd, I think, Scotland.
Yeah.
And they'd be good for it after a rocky start. Like I say, they've come back.
Yeah, for sure. And so we'll pivot to the squads. Obviously, we did look quite at the Scottish type 5 there, but I suppose we can kind of...
Yeah, no, we'll just... The sides were named, obviously, this morning and this afternoon as we filmed this on Thursday. So Wales have gone with Rhys Carré, Ryan Elias, Thomas Francis in the front row, Will Rowlands and Alan Wynne-Jones in the second row. Shane Lewis-Hughes makes his debut at 6 from Cardiff. Tipperick and Faletau 7 and 8, not surprising. Gareth Davis comes in to replace Rhys Webb at 9. Dan Biggar in at 10. Owen Watkin gets Nick Tompkins' jersey, comes into the centre with Jonathan Davis. And Liam Williams returns, I should say, on the wing. With Lee Halfpenny at fullback. Am I missing a winger there? I think I am.
Perhaps.
Josh Adams, I assume.
I
haven't got him down here. I think it's Josh Adams on the other wing. No place in the squad for Louis Rees-Zammit, I should say. The replacements are Sam Parry, who's still yet to start.
He's going to be a debutant starter, but he's actually 28 years old. He's kind of had a late bloomer in terms of his calibre, and with Ken Owens obviously out with a relatively long-term injury, they're kind of mixing it up in terms of that hooker role as well.
Wynne-Jones and Dylan Lewis are the 2 bench props. Corey Hill covers at lock, obviously with Will Rowlands coming in from Wasps. James Davis covers the back row where they have something of an injury crisis. Lloyd Williams covering at 9. Reece Patchell at 10, covering 10, and Nick Tompkins covering the outside backs.
Yes.
Which means no place for Louis Rees-Zammit in the team.
Yeah, big talking points. I'm excited to see Rowlands. I think he's been brilliant for Wasps this year. I think he will add a lot to that second row, and they need... So, like, obviously Alan Wynne-Jones is their stalwart and their incumbent and their legend as well, but they need a few guys to start stepping up in his stead because he won't be around forever, and I think Rowlands could potentially be that. He's been big for Wasps this year.
He has, no question, and they just generally speaking, I think they need some heft in that tight 5.
Yeah,
they brought back
Thomas Francis is the other one at tight head, because I think Samson Lee is another one who's out with injury. So
just a head knock for Samson.
Yes, but you definitely need more options there, and bringing in an Exeter chief in the tight 5.
Yeah, I know he doesn't start for Exeter, but he
comes off. Their bench props are pretty good as well. The good impact. So yeah, excited to see those 2 introduced. Obviously Lewis Hughes as well. Don't fully know what to expect from him in the back row. Hopefully he hits the ground running as well. Debuts can go one of 2 ways. I'm also excited to see the return of Owen Watkin. I always kind of liked Owen Watkin, and I think Nick Tompkins has been a little soft in their centres for him.
Well, I think Wales are struggling to adapt to the idea of not having that barrelling ram both in offence and defence in the 12 shirt.
Yes, be it Jamie Roberts or be it Hadley Parks, they've kind of stuck with that template for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And then without the 2 of them, certainly in the midfield, it was just lacking. It was lacking for any sort of defensive bite. So I think it's very clear to understand where they're coming from with that jersey.
Yeah.
Plus, as exciting as Nick Tompkins is, he's come straight into the Wales team on the back of some good club form, and he
wasn't a regular starter in that Sarries team anyway. He was kind of half on the B team, half on the thing, but he impressed when he did come in enough that they gave him the jersey. So I wouldn't hang him out to dry yet, and he is on the bench to come in.
Yeah.
But he definitely found the step up a little tough in the beginning.
100%. In terms of Scotland and their team, they named theirs this afternoon as well. Not too many surprises in there. Their embarrassment of riches in the tight five boiled down to Sutherland at loosehead, Fagerson tighthead, Brown, Fraser Brown in at hooker. They went for Scott Cummings and Johnny Gray in a lock, and Jamie Ritchie and Mishtafer. Hamish Watson, the Mish. Yeah. He takes the 7 shirt, unsurprisingly, with Ritchie. And Blade Thompson gets the nod at number 8.
That's an interesting one. He's a big, hefty lad. I do like Blade Thompson.
He's played lock before, I'm pretty sure. So it's interesting to see him in there at number 8.
He's a decent footballer too. I think he could work from there for sure. We'll see how it goes. For him. Yeah. Price
and Russell retain their jerseys at halfback, or I should say not retain, but Russell would be the presumed incumbent, even if he's not the actual incumbent.
Indeed.
But the centres Lang and Harris persist. They persist with those two, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. They've gone with Kinghorn on the left wing, Darcy Graham on the right wing, and Stuart Hogg, which means that Duhan van der Merwe takes his place on the bench. The rest of the bench being McAnally, Kebbell, Simon Bergen. That's hell of a front row replacements. Ben Toulis coming off in the lock, super player as well. Yeah. Cornell Dupria covering back row. Scott Steele covering scrum half, so no place for George Horn.
That's a big call, I think, as well. And obviously he's a decent Quinn as well, but I like George Horn, to be honest. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I don't think his form was great, but maybe there's an injury there.
Maybe.
But and then obviously the other ones as well, the two backs, Adam Hastings and, as I say, Duhan van der Merwe.
Yes, it's a good team. What else can you say? Scotland are in rude health in their tight five, as we cited, but then with the returning Finn Russell and Stewie Hogg as well, newly crowned double champion Stewie Hogg, European Player of the Year nominee, despite some dubious moments in the Six Nations earlier this year.
Yeah, if you take a look at that Scotland front pack, that pack of forwards, the front 7 really, outside of Blade Thompson who's coming into the team, they do have like a real sort of settled nature about them. You know, Ritchie and Hamish Watson in great form. Hamish Watson wasn't in such great form earlier in the season, but he's come back in great form, and Jamie Ritchie's taken his game, I would argue, to another level this year. And that tight 5 obviously is just so... Yeah, they're settled, and we've been talking about them all day. They've managed to compete with that, with the other top side. They managed to compete with Ireland, compete with England, beat France.
Yeah,
it just seems like a pack in a really, really good place. And then, as you say, with Finn Russell and Hogg coming back, it does give them the other attacking dimension. I think the area that's obviously the one of most concern from a Scottish point of view is those two centres. You know, with it was Sam Johnson and Hugh Jones in years gone by, and they seem to have fallen out of favour, and now Lang and Harris
are the guys in the now. But they've never really lit it up in the centres, to be honest. In recent years, it's been a little kind of part of... Yeah, a little weakness for them.
England in 2018 and in 2019, to be fair, those are the England games.
Those England games for sure, but then even in those England games there was some softness through the middle that were present too. Like they've not been the full finished article in that centres, and considering how strong that tight 5 and tight 7, as you say, is, and including the bench options there's good impact there. The centres is a point in this Scotland team that you'd cite as a bit of a weakness. But then Wales aren't particularly settled there themselves, so it'll be interesting to see if they can try and exploit them there. But
it will, and I suppose on that note we should pivot on to actually previewing the game in and of itself. Wales and Scotland taking on. We're going to obviously look at the games from the perspective of each team, and we're going to start with Wales, and specifically when Wales have the ball, what are they going to do in attack?
Well, yeah, as we kind of highlighted earlier on, they've been missing a little bit of control with their ball in hand play. They haven't really, they've tested teams, they've strung together some nice sequences of play, which is good. But the halfbacks, Webb and Bigger, they've both been a little bit middling with their kicking. It's been certainly not assured and very kind of loose at times, and it's that's what instigates these shootouts, which Scotland, with Finn Russell and Hogg back in the team, are more than confident and comfortable in a shootout.
Well, I think having Gareth Davis come in for Webb is big in a few areas, and while he's not the most controlling scrum half, you would say, what he does bring is tempo, and what he does bring is that capacity to sort of move the game around. And I think, you know, the inclusions of Thomas Francis and Will Rowlands into the team notwithstanding, there should be an element of caution in the Welsh pack about taking Scotland on up front where they really want to go at it, especially with ball in hand. I certainly think that having Davis in there is going to give them that little bit of impetus to just go wider, to stand wider off the base of the ruck and move Scotland around a little bit, not let them get into the game from a defensive point of view.
Yeah, and try and ask those questions in the centres. They have their Jonathan Davis, they have a lot of confidence in, obviously. try and get it into his hands so he can test those centres out and probe out there, move those Scottish forwards around the pitch that way, and play some Welsh running rugby. You're in Parky Scarlets, try and throw the ball around a little bit and try and get a good tempo going. But less looseness is kind of what you'd want to see, because as much as they've put those good sequences together at times under Pivac, and it's looked very, very slick at times, it also can look calamitous. Sometimes they've just been kicking aimlessly or dropping poorly, and they want to kind of stamp that out, get a bit more control. They're at home, they're against their favourites, they're against a team they kind of feel like they should have the kind of Indian sign over. It would just be nice to see a bit more of a mature performance.
Controlling the pill and exercising a bit more control in the game than they have been is going to be crucial. This Wales team is no different than most in that they do have an eye for a try. And you saw that earlier in the year coming back against England. They actually ended up making that a 3-score game, a 3-point game, when at one point it was probably a 3-score game. England had it to bed, and then Wales came back and got the losing bonus point and got right back in it at the very end of the game. They always have those eyes for tries. You saw they scored a couple of nice tries at the weekend against France as well. So they'll definitely fancy themselves. If there's softness in the Scottish defence, they'll definitely fancy themselves. But it's going to be crucial that they move the ball wide in that multi-phase and don't get sucked in. The other thing that has to be considered as well is the weather. And we don't know what it's going to be like, but if it's wet and if it's windy, we may well see a Welsh team that decides that the sort of bigger bombs might be a decent play. You know, as good as Hogg can be and Darcy Graham can be and Blair Kinghorn can be as well. They have their moments under the high ball, and they're certainly worth testing, especially with the accuracy and quality that the bigger and the likes of Liam Williams bring to proceedings. Well,
with Liam Williams back into the team from the wing, and Halfpenny's solid too, but like Bigger chasing his own bombs is one of his great resources, one of his great playmaking plays that he does. He's brought it out for years. He's done it against the best teams in the world. It would be nice to see a big game from Bigger. In terms of just
certainly after last week.
Yeah, he'll be desperate for one. His place kicking was all over the place by the end of it, but it was also, it just wasn't the day for them.
I genuinely think Pivac might have been a bit braver if there wasn't this sort of air of the weather might be absolutely shite hanging over the game, where it's like, and again, like, you never know, it could be, you know, I see the weather every day, so it's going to be terrible here in Dublin where we are, and I look out and it's like, it's alright, it's a bit windy, but it's not actually raining right now, and you could certainly play a game of rugby in but there's every chance it lashes down, and in that circumstance, if they'd gone for the likes of Sheedy and Reece Sammet on debut, they could find themselves found out a little bit. So I think they've
frozen out. Certainly, if you're Reece Sammet, you might not see the pill for a half a rugby.
So they've kept Halfpenny, the experienced man at fullback, but brought Liam Williams in, the aerial expert, and kept Bigger in the team. I think with one eye to perhaps laying bombs down on Scotland. So as much as we'd like to see them attacking, and I think we will see some decent attack from them, and I still think that they should be moving wide, moving that Scotland team around, especially off breakdowns, like long passes as opposed to short tight passes. Just checking the Scotland defence and making them spread is definitely a crucial thing. But I think when they're deep, certainly in their own territory or even on the halfway line, if it's shite weather, they'll definitely put some air on it.
They will. I definitely think there's every chance for Wales to get on top in this one, but they need to be accurate. First and foremost, they need to kind of minimise just the crazy errors and turnovers that they've been producing with the ball in good positions. They've been doing and I have no problem with a bigger bomb. That's a controlled play, even though you're kind of kicking the ball away. Ostensibly you're trying to kick to contest, but sometimes they've just run out of ideas, and other times they've just dropped the ball cold. So little less of that, a bit more control all told. That's exactly what
and control in terms of managing yourselves in the contact zone. You know, Scotland, they are a jackal threat. They've got Hamish Watson, they've got Jamie Ritchie, they've got Fraser Brown, good jackling turnover
and good tackling kind of players as well. Like the mission, all the whole back row will make their tackles. In fact, the whole front row will make their tackles around the park as well. So a little bit more deception in terms of where you put in the ball carrier. You can do little tip-on passes, get yourself into nice patterns, and then choose the right option. And that is kind of on the halfbacks, but also on the forwards too. Don't be lumbering kind of pointlessly into contact and getting yourself isolated, because Scotland are very good at isolating you or forcing you to even ceding a few yards so that you're away from your support and then getting in. They are kind of divils for that, so they'll need to be mindful of it and try and move them around. And
I do think that the selection at halfback is the right one with Davis. And
I think it's their best. I think it's their best halfback combination. Truth be told, But then when they don't have the ball, when Scotland do manage to turn them over, or they field the high kick that they've put in or something, and Scotland are coming at them, what do they need to do by way of shutting them down?
Well,
more improvements needed for sure. Because their defence, as we said at the start of this, their defence had characterised their Warren Gatland side, and now it's just not that at all. They're not a defensive team at all.
Yeah, there's all sorts of mad tries being conceded. I mean, the tone was actually set in that first game against Ireland when Nick Tompkins against Jordan Larmour just put in a very soft sort of non-tackle, and Ireland managed to get a try in the lead out of it, where, you know, Wales on the goal line against Ireland in years gone by have been anything but soft. It takes forever to unlock them. And straight away you saw that indication. I think the first port of call from Wales, looking at this game specifically, is in the forward pack. You know, we've been talking bigging up the Scottish forward pack, and I'm sure they're bigging themselves up. They're playing with a lot of confidence, and I think if the weather is kind of poorly, Scotland might fancy themselves, or even if it's not, they might fancy themselves playing just that little bit narrower.
Yeah.
You know, if the Finn Russell 30-metre pass isn't on, you might see Scotland take it through a few more phases. They might back themselves, Fraser Brown, Hamish Watson, Jamie Ritchie, they might back themselves to win some contacts.
Yes.
And I think we've known in times gone by that Wales sides have been galvanised by a team trying to do that against them. They can be good at getting out of the line and chopping down receivers and just letting them know there's nothing there for them all day. And they could make it very stale and difficult for Scotland if they can step up and do that.
Well, certainly the debutant in the back row, Lewis Hughes, is it? And also just Rowlands as well is a little bit more heft for them. They will have to do that job. I expect the likes of Rowlands to make all his tackles, Alan Wynne-Jones as well to be very combative in the contact, choke tackling as well, try and hold those Scottish runners up and turn them over. Those are the kind of big moments that you do see typically out of a wily Welsh team.
Exactly. Like we've seen Scotland actually in recent seasons, we've seen good Scotland teams go away to Wales and get scuppered.
Yeah.
And often that's what you see. You know, guys like Hamish Watson who are having big games week in, week out, getting no purchase out of a Welsh back row. They're getting tackled for days, and then all of a sudden, you know, after 40 or 50 frustrating minutes, Hamish Watson is dropping balls and giving away opportunities. And Scotland, you know, as good as their new confidence is, it is new confidence, and it can be dented with you know, consistent failures to make inroads in those areas.
Well, just getting repelled at the gain line is so huge. These games tend to be about that gain line battle. So as you say, the up forward kind of the defence is going to be key for them. Then there is danger out wide, obviously. The distributing powers of Finn Russell, even if you do manage to stop all those forward runners, still formidable, still a risk, still able to identify where typically the space has been just outside, in and around the 13 channel, Jay Davis's channel. There's normally, with the previous defensive system, because it was a tight shoot, that was where the space was just outside him. It's a bit less so now. Like certainly with Watkin coming in, there's even room in the middle there, more so than there had been. It's less sturdy and robust, and Russell is in great form at picking defences apart. Certainly what he did to the Sarries when they had a kind of a hodgepodge centre partnership in for the last quarter of that game, it was just to exemplify that lovely chip identifying the space. I remember
last week watching them play Georgia, and as good as Scotland were for most of that game, when Finn Russell came on, just the different dimension he gave to their attack. They were just floating perfect passes coming from everywhere. He's so good at unlocking the space. And it's a huge job for Jonathan Davis, and it's a huge job for the wingers as well if Wales find themselves getting very narrow. I think we saw, you know, Jack Noel get one over on Finn by just watching the ball the whole way through contact and managing to make a read on an intercept, because his passes do spend a long time in the air. But there's all sorts of, you know, tricks and dynamics that he brings out in the defence. And can you fool him? Can you steal an intercept off him? Can you get him to chip the ball away?
This is it. Bait him into a false picture so he drops it on the toe incorrectly. All of that is kind of the job of the pendulum in the backfield, but also a lot of it will land squarely at Jonathan Davis's door in terms of defence. Will he be able to shut down that offensive threat? And because that's part two. Once you stop them in the tight, you need to stop Finn Russell's passing game
and his kicking game.
Yeah, and then once that happens, then you're definitely favourites. You've already gone a long way towards unsettling and disrupting this Scotland side. But it's easier said than done.
Yeah, it is, and I think you can see also the negative picture. I mean, as much as I'd love to see Louis Rees-Zammit in there, I think we were saying in the context of their attack as well, the reason he's out of there at the moment is probably because it might be a wet day and it might be a difficult day and it might be a kicker's day.
Yeah.
And Scotland certainly seem to have identified that with Blair Kinghorn, Stuart Hogg and Finn Russell in the team.
Yeah.
You know, they can kick very technically and very silkily as well, kick deep in that way. So I think, you know, Liam Williams and Lee Halfpenny and Josh Adams, that pendulum has a serious job on their hands in the backfield as well as in the in the tight areas with the little fin chips.
For sure. Bomb diffuser job going on. And there could be a lot of back and forth kicking, but it'll be minor edges here and there, and hopefully the Welsh new pendulum with Liam Williams back into the side will make a big difference to them.
Yeah, and hopefully just from a Wales point of view, if they can scupper Scotland at source, if they can stop their big ball carrying forwards from going forward and make the ball scrappy and try and pick the ball off at times, but just make it scrappy constantly and get Scotland to kick it back to them. That's very much the picture. If you can never give Finn Russell that clean quick
ball, then certainly when he's a bit more rushed, that's when the mistakes come out of him, because he is going to try things even when he has dirty or sloppy ball, so you want to try and create that environment for him. And then just to pivot onto the set piece, we did build up. It's a huge battle. I don't quite know what to expect at it. Obviously, Scotland have come fresh from beating Georgia last week, which is a very renowned scrum. But Sutherland and Fagerson in the partnership, we were already saying they're taking names, and they definitely are.
Thomas Francis would be another one. It's wisdom that he's come straight into the Welsh team. I don't think that Dylan Lewis or anyone else would have been quite up to the job in terms of containing Sutherland and his scrummaging prowess at the moment, but Thomas Francis rarely goes backwards at scrum time.
And actually the inclusion Rowlands again, who I'll say Rowlands and Alan Wynne-Jones is a hefty lock partnership. It gives them a little bit of extra impetus from the engine room.
I tell you, Cummings and Gray is hefty
too. They're two big Northern Hemisphere packs going smashing into each other, and if 100%. It's a wet day, the set piece could become very pivotal, because the drop balls will come, scrums will be there, so it's going to be a battle. I'd expect a tit for tat. I think probably there'll be a little bit on either side before one gets the edge. That's usually the way these contests go. But I'm not sure.
I find it hard to bet against the Scottish scrum at the moment. It's very, very strong. They're very, very, as I say, they're very settled front seven. And they're putting an emphasis on their scrum game in a big way. And Wales, as good as Thomas Francis is, their scrum hasn't been that great.
No, but struggling with everybody. It's true. But one thing I would say for Wales, in terms of just a traditional point, because I know we've gone there with that intention. I've seen England do it as well. In Wales, when a big bullying pack comes with a mind towards scrumming for penalties, they show a really good ability to lock it down when they need to, even against all form and against all kind of prevailing wisdom. If they can just lock the scrum down, if it doesn't move at all, then that's Wales getting their picture right, because it's just one of those avenues of success for Scotland, scrubbed off, and then you go into taking off the others, chop the ball carriers, stop the fin passing game. It's step one for Wales is with Thomas Francis, just lock it down.
100%.
That's going to be the goal for them, whereas Scotland I think will try and scrum for penalties and territory.
I think at line out as well, it's probably going to be tit for tat, but I'd say for the most part parity. Scotland do like to strike off line out. You got 20 metres between the back lines. It is an opportunity for Finn and the boys, so I would expect some level of competition coming in there from Alan Wynne. For sure. From a Scottish point of view, Fraser Brown's dart's pretty good. Occasional overthrows, but other than that, pretty good.
Yes. I think in terms of poachers at the line out, I think I've seen Blade Thompson be effective in that capacity in terms of poaching.
Alan Wynne, obviously.
Alan Wynne is the big one. The Springboks lost one line out in the World Cup, and it was to Alan Wynne-Jones. So be careful of Alan Wynne-Jones, especially wind and rain. You kind of can be sloppy.
You think Sutherland wants to take control of the game at the scrum, Alan Wynne wants to take control of it at the line out, and certainly if Scotland win a penalty and kick it up the pitch and have the line outs picked off them, it's no good.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other restart is obviously the other set piece is the restart. It'll be crucial in terms of just getting yourself into a good area. It would be nice to see both sides just switched on and exiting efficiently off it, because that's kind of what you want to do. You don't want to be like kicking deep is the prevailing one, bringing in a good press, try and get them to kick the ball out in the full or kick the ball out at around 10 metre line and create an offensive strike play from it. That's become the best restart in the game, and that's
certainly the trend. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing it bounce the other way with somebody trying like little cheeky ball recovery ones off restarts, but certainly for the time being, teams are just pounding the ball deep, and I wouldn't expect, especially in a potentially wet and windy Parky Scarlets, either side to do anything else. What I will say is that Scotland sometimes do have a habit of switching off at restarts and dropping balls.
Can't afford to do that, especially if after a crucial score away from home in a game that you normally lose or a fixture you normally lose. to be coughing up cheap turnovers off the restart is criminal. Just
100%.
granted, it's a losing picture. If it starts happening, Scotland are going to lose the game. So it's just little micro moments in the set piece. But then if you move on to Scotland, just in terms of what they need to do, because their picture is slightly different, when they have the ball, obviously Finn is straight back in as number 10. They didn't stick with Hastings or put Finn at 12 or any of that kind of potential stuff that was like a thought. But no, Finn is their key playmaker, key distributor.
Yeah, he's probably the best passer of a football, arguably the best distributor in Europe.
Yeah, so get him straight in there, and Hogg as well gives them a little bit of oomph from the back line. In terms of just a
Hogg
wide
is
option.
good. Like, he still has the speed. He doesn't need to do too much. Like, Hogg at 10 has never been a good thing. You know, with Finn Russell in the team, he should just shackles off a little bit and focus on your running game, not your passing game.
Try and get it out wide. Find space, ride Finn's passes out into over ball watching defenders and kind of take the outside with it. Because Finn will be looking for the outside. As we said, the outside of Jonathan Davies' 13 channel. He likes testing 13s, does Finn. He really does.
Yeah, he does. He gives them all kinds of problems. Wingers as well. Like, whatever the picture is, if they get too narrow, he'll go crossfield kicks. If they push up too high, he'll chip it over your top. If they stand off at all, he'll pick the right pass.
Yeah.
But certainly providing him, with some clean ball, I think the key really is to get a bit of tempo into their game. I think when Scotland are at their absolute best, you think of like the England games, obviously, in 2019 in that second half, and in 2018 for that whole game. Yeah. When they're at their absolute best, Ali Price looks great, and he's driving a really nice tempo. And because of his tempo, sides can't settle. Nobody's getting their hands in. Their forwards are actually quite good at dynamic contacts in a bit of space.
They can play at that speed, which is good
yeah,
to see.
Exactly. So if they can get 3 sort of very quick rooks off 9, where they're not soaking the tackles and Wales aren't able to slow it down, where Hamish Watson and Richie are picking the right lines, putting a nice bit of footwork on and just getting past the contact. Their ball presentation needs to be good, and then Ali Price gets the ball and it's moved quickly, and Wales can't get any kind of blitz or rhythm going in their defence. And then you feed Finn Russell the ball. That's very much the Scottish picture.
And it's key as well from their point of view that the centres, in terms of like Harris and who's in at 12, Lang, just running good lines to try and sit down or just disrupt the kind of unsettled Watkin and Jay Davis in terms of the new partnership for Wales. Yeah, it's important that Scotland run good lines similar to off 9 once they're playing off Finn. The principle's the same, it's just the centres have the job to do. Run good lines, could be legitimate options such that you sit down and fold the defence, and then Finn will, if you are the correct option, he'll pick you, but he'll try and find the correct option as well. And that's got to be their picture. As far as like we know it'll be a big test. They need their ball runners, ball carriers winning contacts as well. It's first and foremost too. Like if they, like you said, get 3 quick phases off 9 where they don't where
they're not soaking, where they're not being pushed backwards, where they're forcing Wales, I should say, to soak.
Yes.
Those are definitely the pictures that they want. Another little variation I'd like to see. We talk about that outside the 13 shoulder. From a Welsh perspective, I'd love to see them put like a Hamish Watson or a Jamie Ritchie in that channel on their multi-phase, just in terms of offering something new and getting good matchups. I like the idea of Ritchie or Watson with Darcy Graham next to them on a matchup against a couple of Welsh backs, because if there is a soft tackle, Hamish will take it, and he's good enough that he'll look up and he'll link up with Darcy Graham, and that's one of your most dangerous players in space.
Yeah, sure, he grabbed a try very quickly last week against Georgia. He's looking in great form as Darcy Graham, and then even Maitland on the other wing, a bit less pace out and out. He's a bit more of a fullback.
Maitland's gone.
Or sorry, not Maitland.
Kinghorn.
Yes, Maitland is
has
gone.
His own issues.
He was dropped for COVID reasons, or for
barbarians
COVID
hijinks.
Yes, indeed. Blair Kinghorn on the other side is more of a converted fullback. So really, their wide danger men are Hogg and Darcy Graham.
Yeah, pretty much. I would say that.
Yeah, so trying to get them into space, trying to manipulate the Welsh D such that you're creating that chance and putting Graham in. And to be fair to Scotland, more so than a lot of the home nations such as they are good at that. They are good at creating a multi-phase that ends up with their winger dotting down the try. It happened very quickly last week.
They strike off first phase and they strike off 14th phase. They tend to be patient enough. Obviously, with Finn Russell at 10, it takes a different picture where he's always trying to find tries.
Yeah.
And so, consistent slow phases can be more difficult to come by. But I'll tell you, in the rain, we spoke about this in the context of Welsh defence. If the sheets of rain are coming down, And the 30-metre passes from Finn Russell are less of an option in the game. It's just much, much more high risk in that kind of weather. You might see them try and settle down and try and play a slower multi-phase game. I don't love it as an idea. I think it's arguably more part of Wales' winning picture than Scotland's, but they might get an idea about themselves winning those contacts and getting on top of them, and the Johnny Greys and the Cummingses getting on top of them in the tight five and trying to bully Wales. You know, as good as Alan Wynne-Jones is he still up to the task in terms of taking direct contact from giant men at his age, you know, or is he going to buckle?
He hasn't buckled yet. I think that is a more risky picture for Scotland.
He hasn't played that well this year.
No, it's true. But I still wouldn't think that's Scotland's plan A. But I think if it ends up being the plan, and if they succeed at it, it's a terrible thing for Wales, but that would be a huge coming of age for this Scotland pack, because obviously
it feels like it's on the margins.
It could be, like, it definitely could be a case of that. Away from home in Wales, for them to bully their pack would be huge. I'm not saying it's going to go down that way. In fact, I think if they try that and get repelled, that could be seismic in terms of their psychology, and it could actually cost them the game too. It's a risky one.
I would generally err on the side, you know, definitely playing off 9 is no bad thing. They fancy their pack, they like their ball carriers, they think they're good at it. That's fine, but just doing it with a bit of speed, it makes all the world of difference. Quick rucks, not slow rucks.
Tempo has been key to this Scotland side for quite a while, so I hope they stick with it. And then just finally, when they don't have the ball, they need to be sure enough in the midfield, particularly with Chris Harris, similar to Jay Davis on the other side. The 13 is a big channel to try and defend. And Wales have been pretty good, under Pivac included, at exposing some softness in defences. They have been pretty good at heads up pictures. So if Wales generate a bit of quick ball and Scotland are kind of buckled or fractured as a line, the mismatches you would fancy will be spotted by Wales and will be exploited.
They took a lovely try within opening minutes of the game last week against France, where they just, you know, it was from right to left, and they had an overlap and they executed it perfectly. Like, there wasn't a pass out of place. And Wales are still very good at doing that. If Scotland lose their shape, if they find themselves soaking, if they find themselves in the back foot, Wales are bloody good at finding the try. And also Dan Biggar can cross-field kick. You know, he's definitely a handful himself as a 10 to deal with.
As much as, like, we have gone in on their defence being suspect, Wales under Pivac have probably even found a little bit more tempo and impetus in terms of their offensive game. They're finding tries out there, so the onus is on Scotland without the ball to firstly slow them up. Jacklers like Mish and all of these guys in there in the rucks, creating a harrying dogfight at the breakdown, which, to be fair, both of these sides have a tradition of doing, so it can become a bit of a scrap that way. But if it gets a little slower, Gareth Davis gets unsettled, and then they kick a lot more ball away rather than probing through multi-phase.
There's no question from Scotland's point of view, their defensive strengths don't really come from their back line.
No.
If that's where they're having to make defensive plays, they're always struggling with Jonathan Davis running at them. You know, it's more about stopping Wales at source. It's more about the back row and the tight five messing up the Welsh ball in the contacts. If Wales are trying to carry short, knocking them backwards, making sure they don't have a clean possession of the ball, getting even a hand in there, making everything slow, and then picking their moments when a Welshman is isolated. And Hamish Watson's really good at
creating them. To be fair, one of the things that Scotland have been very good at under Gregor as well is, like, even soaking a little bit of the tackle just so that the guy gets in behind the defence just a fraction, thinks it's good, but there's actually a poacher there waiting, and it means that the support, they're just running away from the support and isolating them that way. I think they will look to do little plays like that as well against a slightly unsettled Welsh pack, but they'll try and bait them in and try and turn them over, because they do have turnover men in both front row and back row. So source ball is what they're trying to disrupt. If they can't, big job for the back line to try and shut down what is a very, very dangerous looking Welsh offence.
It is no question. And I suppose that brings us round the merry-go-round all the way to the predictions. What do you think's going to happen in this one?
I'm flipping with it. It's a tough one to call, especially given the circumstance being what it is. They're not quite playing for anything apart from pride and preparation. Normally I would err on the side of the home team, so err on the side of Wales just edging it as they normally have, but I actually think Scotland are probably the slightly better, more informed team. So it's a tough call for me.
Yeah, no, it is. And also Wales won a Grand Slam last year, and they do like to back up Grand Slams. Historically speaking, if you go back to the aughts, they were very much a wooden spoon Grand Slam kind of team, and this could be very much the fallow year in that regard. But
it's true.
Yeah, geez, five defeats in a row for Wales would be alarm bells.
Very
for
unprecedented stuff. That one, like as much as wooden spoons and things, that's a very terrible start. So yeah, the back's to the wall as far as
5 defeats in a row without playing any of the big 3 Southern Hemisphere teams. Yeah, that would be not good for Wales. I think this is an important game, definitely for Wales. But I do like Scotland. I thought I was very impressed with them against Georgia. I know Georgia were sort of not at the pace.
It was their first game in months.
But they just did look good. They looked confident. They looked all on the same page. And, Scottish confidence is brittle at times, and I definitely think there's a win out there for Wales if they can disrupt them enough. But I don't know if I quite trust them at the moment. And while their backs are to the walls and they could prove me wrong, I think Scotland, as you say, are the slightly better team at the moment. And I think I'm going to pick Scotland for a narrow win.
Yeah, well, I'll pick Wales for a narrow win then for Clare.
23-19, something like that.
23-19. Yes. Okay, well, with that, we'll move on. Yes. Because that was only the beginning of Super Saturday.
Indeed.
It does continue with Italy-England, I should say.
You should.
Yes, indeed. A bit more of a... Well, there's more to play for in terms of England are probably... Despite sitting in second at the moment in as far as the table is concerned, England are probably favourites to take this championship, given all the permutations that could happen.
Yeah, 100%.
And this game is going to be a big one for them.
Yeah, this is where the fun really does begin. Yeah, it's taking place Saturday, obviously, Super Saturday, 4:45. That's British time. 5:45, 5:45, Italian time. This is in the Stadio Olimpico in Rome, to be refereed by Pascal Gozer. And by contrast to the iffy weather forecast conditions that are going to be taking place in Wales, Ireland and France have no such luck. It is to be 22 degrees
or Italy
and sunny.
And England, you mean?
I mean Ireland.
France. Yeah.
No such luck. We would have been hoping for a deluge, a beyond, an apocalyptic style shower. With wind and horrors and scorekeepy downiness. We have no such luck. It's to be perfect conditions in Rome, 22 degrees Celsius. With sunny, grand,
very little
running
wind.
Rugby weather.
Lots of tries
for England against the Italians. Here's the context. This is where it gets fun, because all the permutations and all the things you would associate in times gone by with the last weekend of the Six Nations are coming to the fore here again. England obviously in a very strong position to claim the title. They're second in the table, level on points with France, who are beneath them by literally 2 points, 2 in-match points in terms of their points difference, and they are 1 point behind Ireland. And the interesting thing here is obviously they need a bonus point victory first and foremost to move 4 clear of Ireland and 5 clear of France. They're behind Ireland at the moment by 23 in terms of points difference.
Yes.
So every point over 23 that they beat Italy by is an extra point that Ireland have to beat France by.
Yes.
Assuming Ireland don't get the bonus point. Obviously England can't do anything about that.
Yes.
But that is the dynamic going on here, and it's understandable, but it does tend to get very dramatic in these mad points difference permutations.
Well, like Italy have shown a capacity to score some tries in recent times, so like if...
Well, they scored 0 in 2 of their 4 games.
Recent times. Last week, Garbisi with a bit of footwork, and a young man took a nice try at the end, which did cost Ireland as far as points difference, but forces their hand in terms of 4 tries. Now England, typically you would back to put a massive score on Italy. England's still the only team in the Six Nations that Italy have never beaten. And I expect that to continue.
Well, the other dynamic that's going on here as well is that France, who would be favoured to beat Ireland later on, would have to beat Ireland to win the Six Nations by more than England beat Italy. In fact, 2 points more than England beat Italy. So England will have that going on in their back of their minds, as well as the 23-point margin with Ireland. So they would know, if we can get 50 or 60 here, we're going to put this tournament pretty much to bed, assuming Ireland don't get the bonus point win, which... seems like probably a fair assumption, but let's hope not.
Let's hope it's not. They can't afford to assume that way, so they will be trying to do everything they can.
They can't do anything about an Ireland bonus point win, but they can do everything about anything else, if that makes sense. They can rack up a phenomenal score and put France out of the picture and put an Ireland, anything other than an Ireland bonus point win out of the picture in terms of stopping
I expect them to not be kicking threes at all. Something in the English psyche does serve them well when they are the superior team and they know they're the superior team. They tend to just turn up and score a load of tries. Whereas this is something that Ireland struggle with, Wales have struggled with before, Scotland definitely have struggled with.
France have lost twice to Italy.
France have lost twice to Italy as well. But yeah, going into the game as massive favourites, expected to score a load of tries. Loads of teams can struggle with that setting, but England are not one of them. England
they
tend to
score
just
lots of tries.
Yes.
From Italy's point of view, going into this one, obviously, like you were talking about, some shoots of optimism. From my point of view, it's been all very dreadful.
It has
another
been.
step backwards from Italy. Scoring nil in 2 games, defensively very, very frail. Missed tackles and bad shapes. Having some decent shape on offense and some good impetus to go wide, but having the skills let them down more often than not.
That's true.
Garbisi coming in at 10, it is a shoot of optimism. He's a new out half, which is good to see. They have a 10-12 axis going at
Carlo
10-12.
Canna has impressed me from 12 anyway in terms of being, like, he's quite a slight guy, but he actually does okay in the physicality stakes. He's not the worst defender as far as their missed tackle game is concerned.
How many tries did they get against Ireland last week? They got 2.
Yeah,
and at the very beginning of the game, Carlo Canna put a lovely pass in against Ireland, and they went straight up all the way to the Irish line. Conor Murray cynically comes in at the side, plays the ball, whistle, penalty, and yellow card. And Italy kicked 3.
Which was one of the most criminal decisions of the whole tournament.
They could have got close to 4 tries. They should always be going for 4 tries.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It's my prevailing principle that, like, as much as like what we were saying about England being the superior team and needing to score tries, so they need to go for it. Italy are basically a de facto tier 2 team, even though they're not, but they're a tier 2 team in a tier 1 competition.
They're a tier 2 team. They're as tier 2 as a tier 2 team ever tier 2'd.
But they're going into a game as massive underdogs, and it is one of the bones of contention I have. Certainly as a Leinster fan, I see it all the time down the RDS. Zebra come down, get a decent bit of offence off in the first 10 minutes and kick 3 points, and you're like, why? You are going to have a grand total of 3 chances in this whole game. They have to be tries, and then maybe you can pick off an intercept and get yourself a 4-try bonus point, which is a league point. Like, you're going to lose the game.
Like from an Italian point of view, especially the way they're defending at the moment, it's just not reasonable to hope that your 3 points is going to mean anything in terms of, like, we're going to win this game 16-10.
All it does is scrub out the nil. All it does is scrub out the nil. It's a terrible,
which granted thing. They have conceded a nil twice so far this season, but 3s are no better than nils.
3s are no better. They aren't. They just aren't. Like, they are still sitting on 0 points in the Six Nations table,
averaging a 26-point defeat every game, and everybody else has positive points difference on account of their game against Italy.
Yes, exactly. Like, it's surely that state of affairs all leads to, let's just ban 3-pointers. Let's not go for any of them. Kick the corner off every penalty. Try to get an offensive set to work, because
the longer you spend up the other end of the field is the longer you're not conceding as well. You're controlling the ball and controlling the game. That certainly would be a message in terms of Italy going forward. In terms of the squads, looking at Italy, there's some notables. We've talked about some of them already in terms of to watch out for. Their captain Luca Bighi at hooker is a decent player. Obviously their back row would be their main weapon with Negri and Stain and Pelledri. That's obviously massive. And then that 10-12 axis of Garbisi and Canna is always exciting. And Matteo Minozzi coming back into the side
returns from Wasps is good as well, so he'll partner Hayward and Bellini as well. The potential for throwing the ball around with all of that, considering the 10-12 axis and all of that, but I expect them to be just thoroughly outmatched by the England side. And looking at the England side that's named, a few little interesting ones, but just to go through it, we have Mako, George, Sinclair, the tried and true front row, so big, gonna fancy their chances at every scrum. Itoje and Hill, Johnny Hill straight in, has been very impressive this season. Good to see him get rewarded with a cap in this season as well. He's straight in from after the Premiership final. Curry, Underhill, Billy, Vunipola, a very settled, very dangerous turnover machine.
No sign of Jack Willis coming in, but sure look.
No, it's very tough to get in. There's so much depth that England have at the back row that, like, they could pick literally 3 or 4 different test level back row combinations. And then Ben Youngs is going to become a Centurion. He's set to make his 100th appearance or 100th cap for England.
He's had his ups and downs, but
he's been a stalwart for England. Really. He definitely has. And then Farrell slayed Joseph in terms of the 3/4 line and centres. It's an interesting... Obviously, Tuilagi has been ruled out due to an injury picked up in the Premiership. But Slade at 12 with Joseph outside him is an interesting way to go. It's a new look for England.
Eddie Jones, obviously, in his core, I think, does like the idea of 10-12 being distributory and 13 being sort of more of a strike runner.
Yeah.
It does miss heft, on both sides of the ball. It's missing Tuilagi's heft.
Yeah, well, Joseph is certainly no Tuilagi. It's definitely speedy. And you got to think, you don't need that much heft against Italy. Italy just soft out of tackles too often, so it could be a good day out for Joseph. And then the back three, you have May and Watson on either wing, and Furbank comes into the team. Comes into the test team.
Has Furbank played a full test yet? Maybe
he has. Know if he has. He's been in the squad for the last year and a bit.
I remember seeing him playing against the Barbarians at one point anyway, but a fully capped match, I don't know.
Not sure, but here he is anyway. So that is the starters, and then on the bench you have Tom Dunn, Ellis Genge, Will Stewart, Ewells in big hefty lock, Ben Earl in as well, and then Robson in as cover at the halfback, Ollie Lawrence and Ollie Thorley. A tale of two Ollies on the bench.
Yeah, Ollie Lawrence is an interesting one in there. I'm not sure what the situation is with George Ford, but decent opportunity for the Worcester man.
Yes, indeed. And Ollie Thorley as well, an excitement machine. You've been calling for him for a while. It'll be nice to see him come in against some Italians.
I wouldn't have minded seeing him start. Maybe you could have had Watson fullback and Thorley in, but you're looking, I'll settle for 23. He's going to come on and perhaps be a serious impact.
Tired Italy and smash into them.
When England are looking to add to their scores as well, you know, it's all got a very ugly picture for it from an Italian point of view. In terms of the Italian point of view, in terms of what Italy need to do to win the game, when they have the ball, first of all, pray.
Sacrifice a chicken or two. I don't know.
Yeah, you need more than a chicken.
A virgin. No, I don't know if there's any hope for any of it.
No. I mean, listen, they could always have Garbisi do that sort of, you know, step and swivel and dummy thing that he did against Ireland last week.
That was a good try, taken by a young man. I'm excited about Garbisi, and in fact, I'm excited about Italy's capacity with Carlo Canna in there. It's optimistic, if nothing else, to be dual distributing, trying to throw the ball around.
With it, yeah.
Like compared to several years ago, before Conor O'Shea even came in, and they literally couldn't pass from one side of the pitch to the other without dropping the ball. Yeah. They've improved in that area. There's no doubt about that. And they were a little unlucky in the World Cup in that they didn't get their chance to go against the All Blacks and didn't get Parise's last game and send off and all that. But they have improved, no doubt. And the World Cup pool didn't really reflect that, because they were comprehensively better than the two Tier 2 teams and comprehensively bested by the two Tier 1 teams.
No question. They didn't get to see a test. I wonder though, has their passing game and their attacking chops not dipped a little bit? Even
maybe.
Since
there was certainly looseness in the Ireland one. There were a few instances where they did create a bit of space and there was a chance to use it, but it was 2 or 3 slack passes that cost them it, and it ends up being a Pelledri carry instead of an overlap or something. You know,
they have a decent habit. I was watching the Ireland-Italy game last week with a mind, first of all, from an Ireland point of view, with my selfish hat on, going like, can we get, you know, ruck 2 passes or more and then another ruck?
Yeah.
And it was depressing how few occasions Ireland did that.
Yes.
But actually Italy, by contrast, seemed to be dialed in that way, in the sense that they were always, it's something we talk about in an amateur rugby context, you know, just moving the ball, you know, 2 passes before a contact, let's get that dialed in. And Italy seemed to have that dialed in a little bit, but then some of the quality of the passing was really desperate.
Yes.
And that was it was checking their runs, and it was preventing them from gaining access to the wide channels.
Even when there was space sometimes. They managed to move it enough such that the defence had buckled and then just couldn't execute.
Well, here's the thing, and I bring this point up in with a few teams, but I think it's definitely important in an Italian context. You know, they've got Monsieur Canna there. Monsieur, I'm sure it's not Signor, I don't know what it is in Italian, but they have Canna in there, and they have Garbisi coming into the team. They've gone with the dual distributor thing. Where's the boot of these guys in general play? Where are the little chips? Where are the checking of the defensive line? Where's the kicks in behind to the corner? Where's the territory game? That's Italy's kicking game, and so many of the Tier 2 teams, it's the same. You know, this is why I love watching some of the South American stuff and all the mad ways they find to kick the ball and get down the field.
Yes. There's
so little creativity in it. You've got 2 halfbacks. You don't need to be bombing the ball into the air exactly how England expect you to be doing.
Yes.
You need to move them around a little bit. isolate one of their back three getting out of position and put in an accurate kick, and then get yourselves on top of the territory game, force them to exit, have that be the picture.
That's a great plan.
It's such a weapon. It's a weapon in any team's arsenal. Kick the ball.
Telling you now, midfield, Negri carry, Pellegrini carry, Stain carry, Caterpillar ruck, box kick, coming right
dreadful.
up.
It's dreadful.
Right
You
up.
know exactly what to expect.
I know.
Like, that's the thing, is go wide, and then trust these guys. You've got a young 10 and a young 12. Both of them have a decent kicking game. Yeah. They've made their names kicking. Carlo Cano was never a 12 until this season. Yeah. He's a 10 by trade.
And quite a kicking heavy 10. Yeah. Certainly Zebra kick away. Probably too much ball in a Zebra shirt with him. But
I don't mean bombs into the sky, but from 10 jazz hands as a solution in terms of creativity either. You know, I mean move it wide, maybe kick it off second pass as opposed to first pass.
Well, England are going to be getting up in their face. There probably will be a bit of space in behind for the deft little chips and stuff if they can start working.
I really think like the Rog kicks, the old maybe 50-22 if it came in would bring it back into the game, but I think it's such a missing element at the moment. Getting the ball, especially from tier 2 sides, like focusing on getting the ball deep into your opponent's half and accurately getting it towards the touchline and finding grass and forcing them to exit, because they're just going to be ready for the box kicks. They're not going to work. Box kicks won't work. Not against England.
They're too good. They're too good. He's just going to take it and run back at you. Yeah. And that's where English tries come from. England are going to gobble it up all day. Like as much as like Furbank's fresh in there, you want to test him, but not like test. There's a difference between wanting to test him and just kicking the ball up to him. That's not a test. A test is like what England did to the out of position Robbie Henshaw. Actually, from our point of view, he was thrust in at fullback in World Cup year in the first game, and England isolated it and moved him attacking kick this way, then that way, find grass with everyone, England run him around.
Eddie Jones's England have been the best kicking team and the most creative kicking team in World Rugby, and it got them very, very far.
It got them close to the World Cup. They got them to the final and more. Yeah, certainly their restart innovation we were citing in the previous preview about just kicking deep and forcing them to kick out on or at around the 10 metre, create that offensive platform. Yeah, England will be testing their back three as well with some attacking kicks, but I'd say only partially and only in the first half. I think by the end England will probably be happy to run it back to them. But from Italy's point of view, you want to obviously get your big ball carriers on. You do want Bramstein to have a big game. He probably owes them one after last week. He was a bit poor. He does.
But also, one of the things I have liked seeing Negris and Pellegri's popping up on the wing. We talked about it in the Scottish context as well. Like, as good as Bramstein is, he doesn't need to be running into Underhill all day. He needs to be on the wing linking up with Minotzis and Haywards and trying to get his guys in space. And I definitely think Italy, that is something that earnestly Italy have tried to work in, and it'll just depend on the quality and the crispness of their passing, which was missing last week. But listen, they've got clear cut conditions. They will have big Englishmen in their face, but in terms of weather, then there shouldn't be an issue playing fast rugby on a dry track.
Yeah, exactly. And then with Minozzi back in, Hayward still in, there's wide men out there. There's potential all over this Italy team. It's got to be go for tries, and it's, as you say, the kicking game will be a factor in that. Try and mix it up. But then when they're without the ball, which is a bit more of an
uglier picture. This is where it's a hard one to sell. Italy are going to stop England.
Italy aren't going to stop England, but they need to focus on their tackle technique, because certainly we were seeing some by the end of the Ireland game their defensive system was broken, but certainly at the beginnings of games, their defensive system doesn't have a chance to get buckled before they miss a tackle. So it's you don't even know, from a defence coach's point of view, you don't even know if your shape is working or your press is working or not before they just miss a tackle. So the defence, it's broken anyway when you miss a tackle. So it's got to be first up, tackling has to be the focus for them. They 100%. All have to go low. They are smaller man for man than them. Unless you're Bramstein in the contact, don't go high at all. Go low, chop them, put them to deck. Put the runner to deck. That's got to be the focus. First, second, third port of call when they don't have the ball.
Exactly.
Make your tackles.
It's something that should be drilled into them in terms of stopping England. But that said, what England do bring in terms of offence is not just heft. They do have a particularly hefty tight five on the pitch this week. But they got Farrell and Slade as dual distributors.
They're going to
expect
sit
them to be
deep. You'll have Joseph running from deep, and it'll be very tough to bring a press.
It's absolutely pointless telling an Italian defence to get into Farrell's face, because he is going to be, as you say, they're going to be sitting deep and just moving it wide. So tight drifts, and you want to talk about where they struggle in the tackle. It's when they have to tackle and there's 5 metres of space either side of them without another defender. And it's those one-on-one situations where they do really struggle.
Yeah, that's where the misses come from. So and England will know that. That'll be where they're trying to target them. So I would hope it has been a focus for them. But then, Minozzi and Hayward are a bit... Like, certainly Hayward he's been great for them, but he had a very soft contribution for one of Ireland's tries last week.
He did, yeah. Put your shoulder in, man.
None of them do. It's very army tackles from small men. Like, small men need to put their shoulder in. And it's not like they can't. Like, certainly in our Leinster heads, like Luke McGrath's a tiny fella. He puts his body about in terms of throwing his shoulder in and all this. It would be nice to see improvements in that area. It would be lovely to see each one of the back three make a good one-on-one tackle, a good hit in the wide channels when there's space.
Yeah, it's slowing England up in all kinds of ways. It's all they can hope for. If they play the game of their lives, they can make a game of it, and that's got to be the hope.
Yeah.
It's going to take some clutch steals as well.
Yes.
I think if any scenario in which Italy put up any kind of fight is going to involve English runners, getting a little headstrong and a little isolated, trying to finish tries and maybe being a little impatient.
White line fever from England could play them into the game, but it's got to be coupled with that defensive bite in terms of their one-up tackles, accurate kicking game in terms of asking questions, and then just going for tries as well. The big headline point as well. Don't miss tackles, but also go for tries. Even though you're at home, you're comprehensively outmatched, you're outgunned. You need to make every little foray you have into their half needs to result in a 7-pointer before you have any chance.
Not only result in a 7-pointer, but if you get a penalty as well, the opportunity to spend minutes down there and frustrate England, and especially an England team that knows that they have to go for tries. There's a capacity, if they can step up in that opening 20 or 30 minutes, for perhaps England to lose their patience. We'll pivot to England and talk about them. They shouldn't lose their patience. No. They're a better team, but if they do, which they can be prone to, and they do silly things, that's a way for Italy to be played into the game.
Exactly, yeah. Just a brief look at the set piece. Obviously, from Italy's point of view, Brownstein is a good line-out poacher himself. Yeah. England do have options. I'd expect they'll try and recognise that and not throw to two.
It's interesting that exactly. Well, Brownstein is a number 2 kind of stealer, but he does have a very good read on the line out, and from an Italian point of view, England have gone with heft for like all over that team. Johnny Hill, what a colossus as well. Curry's decent at line out time, but it's by no means his area of expertise. So they really have one big line out jumper, and that's Itoje, and I assume he's going to be calling them, and I imagine they'll be a bit creative and call some to Underhill maybe, or something like that. But certainly from Bramstein's point of view, marking Itoje...
I kind of expect him to steal one. I would expect him to spoil at least one line out for England.
Big South African paw there.
He's very, very good at it. He's very good at it. Like a Peter O'Mahony for us. He's kind of expert jumper at 2, and certainly a slack throw can be punished. Scrum time.
It looks like England, in their terms of their selection, have almost sacrificed a bit of line out impetus to just pick an absolutely monstrous
every scrum a penalty. And every penalty a try.
Who's the ref? Actually, we talked at the top of the show who the ref is, because that's effective. Gozair. Interesting. Is Gozair going to give England their rewards? He's more likely than some to give them their rewards. They wouldn't want Nigel Owens.
He does actually ref the scrum, Gozair. To his credit, he does eyeball the props.
Mako, George, Sinclair, Itoje, Hill. That's the tight 5. With Genge to come on, and I know Dunn and Will Stewart are a little green still, but Ewell's even in the tight.
Ewell's a big hefty yoke,
That is big. Italy are going to really have to do a serious job to lock down that scrum.
They're going to struggle with it from minute 1. So don't drop the ball. Try not to play them into the game. Try and minimise scrums. As you say, perfect rugby conditions. Hopefully the ball won't spend too much time being dropped, and then we won't have many scrums. But from England's point of view, then when they have the ball, as we said, be patient. Be patient, be physical. You will get your scores.
Exactly.
Don't necessarily be trying to rush it. Just
no, exactly. Even if things haven't gone to plan, like the biggest thing for England is not to compound mistakes, because they know, and we all know, how much better man for man they are than Italy. So from their point of view, in terms of racking up a score, listen, they like to start fat. They like to start like a house on fire, and I expect them to try doing that. Like if they open the game with a restart, I expect them to put the Italians under all kinds of pressure, and then maybe get an attacking set and score a try. That's obviously plan A.
It is.
But one of the only ways this game could go wrong for England is if they don't manage to execute in that first 20 minutes and they're a little bit sloppy and Italy are playing well, and then they panic.
Yeah.
And if they panic and then start doing stupid things and the likes of Kyle Sinclair lose the head and start punching people, that's the stupid shit that they don't need.
Exactly.
What they need is to just calm down. Even if it's 0-0 at half time, I'd back them to put 60 on them, frankly.
Exactly.
You know?
The second they know, that's the point. Like, patient rugby is all you can play. Patient physical rugby, because you know the last quarter is going to be floodgates opened. England are going to run in tries, so just be expecting that. Try and play yourself into the game patiently. Trust, like with Owen Farrell and Slade there as an axis, those are two assured heads, and Slade playing some scintillating rugby for Exeter. He's been their key playmaker from 13, so now he's a little closer to the action. And then with Centenary at scrum half as well, there's a lot of like nous and experience in that 3/4 line, enough that you'd think they should be exercising control. They should be moving the ball. They'll be deep. They will be running on hard lines from deep to test those wide men.
The only area of concern when they have the ball, obviously apart from basic errors like drops and lack of focus like that, it's just to run good support lines and be there in the offensive ruck. Italy will have guys who go for jackals. They arguably go for them too much because they know how bad their defense is. They're often committing.
Every ruck needs to be a turnover or a steal or something, or else it will be a try.
So England need to hyper focus on protecting the ball around that contact area, and then just run it through phases and do it patiently, because it doesn't take many phases for the Italian defence to give up scores.
I think they'll also England will be bullish enough to do things like run at Bramstein, run at Negri, run at Pellegrini, occupy them in a defensive capacity by making big hits against two latched massive guys, and then go out wide, because like if you can get it out that far, Minozzi's going to miss the tackle, or Hayward's going to miss the tackcle, and like if he doesn't have a Stain or a Pellegrini to bail
Watson
him out,
lined up 1-on-1 against a Minozzi or even a Padovani, like that's or Bellini even, that's just
it's try time.
That's try time. Those guys can't tackle really.
So I think they will, and I think in the multi-phase they will be targeting their key men. They'll recognise that Italy's back row is actually pretty good, because this is something Ireland did as well, is just run into them the whole time, and then they'll be less effective on the other side of the ball.
As much as we admire the Bramsteins and all, like they'll have their hands absolutely full if they have Billy Vunipolas and Tom Curry coming down their channel all day.
Exactly, and England will be aware of that. And then just be ruthless is
exactly it. And then the tries will come then in the last 20 minutes.
Patient, ruthless, and the last quarter will be all theirs. And they with half a mind on the scoreline they need to have, but only half a mind. Don't let it distract or kind of get too much of a fog, especially if the first quarter hasn't gone their way. But then the more likely thing is that the first quarter will go their way and they'll just rack up the score. When they don't have the ball, then in terms of a defensive output, it's pretty straightforward to be honest.
Maintaining discipline is key, obviously. Just not giving Italy soft ins to the game, stupid penalties, high tackles, that kind of shit, that kind of stuff shouldn't stand.
You have two pacey open sides, and you have a very green 10 for Italy, so I'd expect a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure.
I would expect definitely getting in Garbisi's face and giving him not the kind of room to do his little swerve and dummy thing that he had going on. Just giving him no room at all would be definitely something that I'd look at if I was in an England shirt. If I was feeling mean and I was Eddie Jones as well, I'd be encouraging. Because Slade is actually a ferocious defender and he's in at 12. I would expecting them to delve out some punishment to Carlo Canna if he thinks he's going to plough it up, Jamie Roberts style, and go forward yards and present the ball back. I would expect England to meet that play, because they've been running it every game. I would expect England to meet that ferociously if they try it. If they try and just give the ball to Canna for a soft hit up in the midfield, I expect them to absolutely leather him.
Yes. But that being said, Canna's a bit short, and Faz, wrap.
Well, wrap your arms. Wrap your arms.
Just wrap, get low and wrap. Those kind of things. They're only Italians. You can get low and wrap.
Yes,
they don't need a red card. Like that is exactly the only way it could go wrong for England is with either a Faz hit like that, or as we said, Sinclair. If some of these guys seeing red losing for a minute, losing the plot, getting themselves carded, red carded would be the worst, and then suddenly you could be in an arm wrestle if all that happened. But with all going to plan, they'll just try and dominate them, force the loose box kick that's going to come their way, and then strike off the turnover. That's going to be England's picture. 100%. So with all that, what are your predictions?
Well, in terms of predictions, I'd like given the day that's in it, I think you have to go by points difference. I think that's our guess.
You're not going for a home win, no, the home team,
I'm not going for the home
field
team.
advantage.
No, no, I don't think so. But in terms of how close do you think it's going to be? Will England put this to bed from a French point of view? It's hard to know exactly how well they'll do. If everything clicks, obviously great.
Yeah,
they didn't get their run out against the Barbarians. It's conceivable Italy do some stuff. It's conceivable Italy get a couple of tries.
Especially if England are loosely and going for tries, you could see even a pick or something.
Because the result that really would throw a spanner in the works is something like 52 to maybe 21, and then all of a sudden Ireland are like win by 8 points. It's definitely a different one. And then even France are thinking like if we can get a score going in the first half, maybe this will be on for us.
Yeah.
Whereas like if they do something like 63-10, it's game over.
Yeah.
So I don't know which of those two it's going to be closest to. I'd say I'll give Italy 15 points, which is similar to what they got last week. We'll call them 5 3-pointers. No, say they'll kick 1 3-pointer stupidly at the start of the game like they did last week, and then get 2 tries, 1 unconverted, and they'll get 15 points. And then how many will England rack up? I'm going to say 50 is what Ireland did last week. I'm going to say 55. So 40-point win for England, which would mean Ireland would have to win by more than 17 or get the 4 tries, and France would have to win by 41.
Yeah,
that's a decent target that they'd have set if they do that.
Yeah,
do you want to take an over or under on that?
I'll take the under then. I'm going to be favouring the underdog with an under. I'm going to say they'll beat that 40-point spread just with a 39-point defeat. No, I'll say Italy will make it a scrap somehow, and England will be stupid at times and only win by 30 points and throw that spanner in the works for Super Saturday. That's what I'll say.
Okay, that's probably a more optimistic prediction.
Yeah. Okay, and with that, we move on to the main event of the Super Saturday, such as it is. We are in Paris, Saturday, 8:10 local time, or say 8:10 British Irish time, 9:10 I think in France.
That's right.
Stade de France, Paris. It's France v Ireland. It's going to be reffed by Wayne Barnes, returned from his COVID, missed out on the Premiership final, I think.
Yeah, actually, I have Wayne Barnes down as the ref, and it didn't even occur to me that he was COVIDed out last week. There could be a substitute ref.
That he's down certainly as it stands. I'm not sure if that has changed because he was a doubt.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, the weather in terms of the forecast is meant to be about 16 degrees and clear enough.
Not going to
conditions.
Be not like the Wales game where we're expecting a potential washout.
Yeah, no, this is good running rugby conditions. It's fine. Certainly, like we've seen Ireland struggle and flail about in the 28-degree heat before. It won't be anything like that. So you'd expect both teams to be comfortable and confident enough and going for it, given the scenario. We'll look at the colour of the game, like. Obviously, we were outlining in the England preview just how the points differential is working. Ireland sitting in first currently. They know that a bonus point win puts them out of reach and gets them
impossible
to catch. Besides that, they will know this is the last game of the weekend, so they'll know exactly what points margin will do it for them.
They have a 23-point buffer over England, and I think they have to assume that won't be enough to make the points difference a relevant
thing. Yeah, for sure. Like if England do anything like what they should do and normally do, then you're looking at like even if it's one of those scenarios like we have to win by 12 points if Italy
Would you not just go get the 4
Yeah, exactly.
tries?
Like in what scenario are you winning in Paris by 12 points without scoring 4 tries?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not going to happen.
Planning an awful weird game.
Yeah, exactly. Like so realistically, Ireland will be going in with the knowledge that they need to win and score 4 tries in doing so. And in France
is even worse. Like they have to score 4 tries and win this game by a truckload of points. Yes. It's a really interesting one. They went and picked their full team last week against Wales, which was a complete dead rubber friendly game, and now they're going to focus. They've gone with their full team again this week against Ireland, and it's all with a mind that this Six Nations is super important and is the most important thing. And it was already over, it was gone. And the second they lost to Scotland, they're going to have to win this game by more than England beat Italy. And if England are in a cruel mood, it's just going to be an unbelievable task in front of them. But I wonder, like, if they can come out with pomp and flair, French teams of old did pump Ireland, but they're going to have to get off to an absolute start.
Certainly in terms of, like, Ireland will likely be throwing the ball around a bit more than they usually have in terms of seeking that try-scoring element. And to be honest, you'd back this French side over that Irish side in a shootout game. And they certainly in the Wales game last week, Wales came throwing the ball around, scored a try very quickly. Are an exciting young PVAC coach team who like to think, and this France team at home did just best them in that shootout.
Listen, from a pure colour and neutral perspective, just the occasion of it, you can just soak it in for a moment. You got this Saturday night primetime game, end of the Six Nations, when the first whistle blows. 3 teams could be crowned Six Nations champions at the end of it, and both teams are incentivized to go for it and score tries. You know, everything, it has everything except fans, obviously, which is unfortunate, but it is just a quality occasion, great rugby occasion, one of those, and it's one of those real amphitheatres and stages and rugby as well, the Stade de France. It's a great.
I hope they let the band in.
Yeah, you get the socially distanced band to play some tunes in the background.
Like,
they should absolutely do that.
They should do that, but
I think France is back in lockdown, so you can forget about it.
They can lock them in. They can be locked down in the stadium while the match is going on.
They could be doing it remotely and having it pumped through the stadium sound.
No. But then, just in terms of, you're dead right in all of that. It is a massive occasion, and it is a shame that the fans won't be there for it.
But it's going to be great.
It is also going to be great, and we're going to be watching on Halloween night. And just the squads that were named, obviously France, you said, did go ahead with and name their best team.
A team that's been very settled, obviously, minus Teddy Thomas, who's injured. Yes. It's Cyril Bay, Julien Marchand, Mohamed Houas, Bernard Leroux, Paul Willemse, Francois Croix, Charles Olivon, Aldrit,
captain, I believe.
Yes, he is. Aldrit in at number 8, Antoine Dupont, Roman Entamac. In the centres, they've gone with Arthur Vincent and Vakatawa, which means that they moved Gaël Ficou to the wing, with Rates on the other wing and Boutier.
Yes, big Boutier in a fullback.
Yeah, he's been a real find this year. And on the bench, they have Camille Shah, Gross, Demba Bamba, Taufi Fanua, Cretin. Baptiste Serran covering scrum half as he has been. Retier is in line to make his first cap. He's I think is he still in La Rochelle? I'm not sure, but he was Rates' partner in La Rochelle back when Rates was there. Yeah. And Thomas Ramos rounds out the bench for France.
Yeah, very, very good team. Very, very good team.
Yeah, nice balance
it's
to
definitely,
it.
I'm loving this new look France. I've hated it, despite the fact that we've been the beneficiaries of it. Like Ireland have got one over on this French team and Toulouse even in the club level for the last few years. But this is by far the best France team we've seen in pretty much the last decade. And rugby needs France to be good, and I think the fact that the World Cup 2023 is in France has kind of focused their minds a little bit on the fact that they need to be good for rugby's sake and for their own sake. They can't be turning up and rocking up and in fourth year after year in the Six Nations.
In terms of the key difference, it's probably up front, as deadly as this backline is and has been. I mean, they have had deadly backlines in the past, although it is good to see that sort of Bastereau team
all of that gone.
Done away with. I mean, how much better is Vakatawa in the 13 shirt than Bastereau?
Yes.
Plenty better. But I think that the real difference maker this year has been the capacity of their pack. By and large, Scotland game excluded from this, but their ability of their pack to really take it to the big teams and
stand
beat them.
up and be counted for certainly at least 50 or 60 minutes of the game. They can be thereabouts, and they have good players throughout.
In years gone by, they've had good front rows and they've had good back rows, but what's really been missing is the second row, and I think that the key thing this year has been the stepping up of Bernard Leroux and Paul Willemse, who was once in there as a second row, and you would have thought, like, what is this journeyman South African doing in a French team, dropping balls and playing lazy rugby, and like, he would have frustrated the hell out of you. And he's really come into his own this year. He looks brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely an improvement compared to
and the like.
Yeah. Well, who do they have in last year? I can't remember his name.
Itoria,
former converted back row. Just softness throughout. Whereas it's a more hefty pack, and then certainly the decision to keep Shat on the bench, which is something they've done all year. Marchand is a quality hooker. Shat is probably their best hooker, but it just means that in the second half they have guaranteed impact off the 100%. Bench, which is great. It's a harsh on Shat because on form he deserves to be in there. But
it's one of those things, the Bismarck Duplessis thing that used to go on in South Africa as well. You've seen it done. You've seen class hookers deployed from the bench in many a team over the years. It's a pretty decent formula.
It is. It guarantees impact, because certainly in the second half they still find the fitness issue is a thing. They aren't quite as fit as the other teams in the comp a lot of the time.
And as good as the other pack options they have are Gross Bamba, Taufi Fanua and Cretan. Shah is probably the most dynamic of all of those guys, including Cretan, the back rower. Shah brings dynamism off the bench and a second wave to the impetus of their pack.
He's one of the best hookers in the world right now is Camille Shah.
100%.
But then to pivot on to Ireland, who have named their team. First up, number 1, Cian Healy, your man, turning 100 today.
On Saturday. 100 caps for Cian on Saturday. I mean, I can't speak highly enough of him. I think he's been a phenomenal loosehead over the years. I mean, he burst onto the scene as a skinny young quick lad in Leinster colours.
Developed into a great scrummaging
developed
machine.
Slowly and surely. Like he first cut his teeth as a scrummaging loosehead at the World Cup in 2011 when he demolished the Australian scrum when Ireland kind of pulled their trousers down in the group stage and got a win there. Thus cementing Australia's terrible record at Eden Park that they thought they were going to do away with. Which was funny, but Cian Healy owned that game. He owned the scrum in that game, and really from there he's had a lovely balance between being a very effective prop in the loose, good ball carrier. He's had some fantastic moments, perping Richie McCaw, and to becoming just a really, really great loose-headed scrummager. And certainly from 2015 right through to perhaps 2018, 2019, probably not, but 2015 through about 2018, and maybe even a couple of years before, he was one of the best scrummaging looseheads in the world, possibly that the world has ever seen outside of South Africa.
He was taking names all through that year.
I remember doing Carl Heyman in a European semi-final. He's been one of my favourite players for a very long time, and while he has dipped a little bit in the last couple of years in terms of the elite standards that he had set for himself, he's still a very fine, brilliant test level prop, and certainly to get to century of Ireland caps is a super achievement and well deserved. He deserves a moment of attention.
He does, yes. No, we're huge Cian Healy fans here, so fair play to him. And then beyond that, we have much the same team as last week for the Italy game, with a few changes forced. We have one change forced. You have Herring, Porter to complete the front row. Then Tyburn and Ryan renew their partnership in the second row. Doris, Connors, Standard is the back row. Interesting to see Connors get the nod there. Still incorrect to have Stander at 8 and Doris at 6. The jersey numbers should be switched, but whatever. Murray, Sexton retain their place as halfbacks. Then Aki Henshaw, ring rows, obviously suffered a broken jaw in nasty one in charging down a kick. So in steps Henshaw to fill in his jersey, and then the back three remains Keenan, Conway, Stockdale. Again, should switch the jerseys. Keenan should be fullback, Stockdale should be 11.
That one's arguably more impactful, although both have their impacts in terms of getting the debut guys into the right jerseys. Caelan Darras has played number 8 a bit now for Leinster, but has played number 6, I should say, a bit for Leinster. But he is a number 8. He came up as a number 8. He is a number 8. He's a very good number 8. He's got ball skills, which I know you like at number 8.
Oh, no,
it's CJ Stander just couldn't be more of a number 6. If he tried. He's never been a number 8 at all.
He's been a number 6 playing at number 8. He's done that for Ireland for years. It's a constant gripe of mine. He's a very fine player. He leads a defensive line well. He's very physical. He just can't pass a ball properly. He's not a good passer of a football, which is what a number 8 needs to be. A number 8's not just exclusively a ball carrier. He's a playmaker. Look at Hoskins to Tutu. Look at Kieran Reid.
It doesn't tell in too many areas because you can chuck the rolls about, but even at the base of a scrum, having a guy
he's terrible at that. Actually, it's one thing we've missed since Jamie Heaslip has retired, is a guy who can control the ball at the base of the scrum. His footballing is not great. I would love to see Doris.
His heft is great. But his ball skills might let him down sometimes. They have on the bench gone for Heffernan, the Connacht lad, covering hooker, Ed Byrne covering loosehead, Finlay Beelum and covering tighthead, Delan covering lock, Peter O'Mahony covering the back row, Jameson Gibson Park, Ross Byrne and Chris Farrell in the backs. It's more or less the exact same team, obviously, with Farrell coming in on the bench. Interesting, there's a couple of interesting omissions in that one. Obviously we would know quite a bit about the general relative form of some of these Irish guys, and as good as Gibson Park is, and to see him coming in, and as good as Murray can and has been, Kieran Marmie in the form scrum in the country, not in there, and Josh van der Fleer, who's been an absolute stalwart in the 7 jersey and a brilliant defender, usurped seemingly by Will Connors, who's come straight into the team. And listen, he got man of the match last week. He played great, but it's interesting to see Josh out of the picture.
Yeah, that is very strange to me. because he hasn't been in bad form actually either for Leinster or for Ireland. So
and what Leinster did, and what I kind of assumed Ireland would do, is they put Will Connors in, I think, for a semi-final game, and he got man of the match, and then they took him out and brought Josh in for the final of the Pro 14, and he got man of the match. I thought they might try that, but listen, I have no issues with Will Connors.
I think he's been brilliant. I think he's lit it up in a Dan Levy-ish fashion this year. He's kind of burst through and really taken the jersey with two hands, so fair play to him. But then we move on to just the outlook for either side in terms of what they're looking to do, and we'll start with the hosts, France. And what they need to do with the ball. When they have the ball, how do they attack this Irish team? Well, it starts with tempo, doesn't it? Like, Ireland are a slower team than France, typically. And
Ireland don't like it when the pace is at helter-skelter. In terms of when they're defending, I don't think anybody would like to be up against this French team when they're playing with tempo.
Yeah, they're very tough to
They're
stop.
tough to cope with. They have great instincts. They really do run excellent support lines, and they focus on not leaving each other isolated, and they'll flood very narrow channels with very many players, and all of them will get a touch. Their offloading game is stellar.
on the wing again is one thing they've done before, where it just means they can flood those channels with centres, de facto centres, and try and link and create those overlaps. It's a good picture for them.
And then they always have Duponts and Olivons running tracking lines and support lines all day long. That's just drilled into their heads.
He's the most important player for them, I think, is Dupont.
In
terms of generating that tempo and control, he's stellar, and especially because Ntamak is a fine player, but he's actually like the tradition in France. It's the petit general. It's number 9 who does most of their playmaking. The 10 can sometimes be a bit of a passenger in those teams. He's certainly we've seen that for Toulouse and for France too.
Although last week Ntamak was stellar against the Welsh, and he really did have a lovely game. He was cutting lines. Wales were standing off him a bit, and he was able to make some things happen. I think they have to understand that up against Ireland, Ireland have picked Will Connors for a reason, and this is Will Connors' guy who's just an out and out defender at 7, and he does fly up in the 10 channel and in that first receiver channel, and be it a forward or an out half. Get in your face and make good tackles that drive you back behind the gain line. And that's what he's trying to bring. He's trying to bring that Underhill game. So I think France do need to make a couple of adjustments to that, understanding what Ireland have done. I think they need to probably sit a little deeper in their line, perhaps, and they're pretty good at doing that usually, just making a blitz a non-factor by standing off. And then the other thing would be to perhaps get some of their big runners, some of the maybe the Olivons of the world, maybe the Aldrits of the world, or maybe even some of their hefty guys like Willemse, getting into Will Connors off first phase or second phase and sitting him down and making him tackle you, and then moving quick ball off that. I think that's a very effective strike runner if Ireland are thinking we're going to use this guy.
If you can occupy Will Connors in a tackle without forcing a breakdown, either you can get if you can get the ball free to Dupont wrapping around, and then suddenly Connors is out of the picture and you're a little wider. That's a tougher picture for Ireland to defend.
It is. If Ireland are thinking we're going to use this guy to slow up French ball and attack them at first receiver, and then France sit him down and move the ball instantly, then that defensive shape is falling away at the first hurdle, and all of a sudden they can use their instincts and attack the space, and Ireland will be a little disjointed. That's definitely a winning picture for them.
It is. That's what they're going to try and create.
The other thing they have to consider is obviously that Ireland are going to have 2 defensive-minded centres, and Aki and Henshaw trying to shut them down.
Probably their most defensive-minded combination.
Well, I think
Henshaw Farrell.
Henshaw Farrell would be the one. Aki has a bit of.
Oh, he has flair.
He likes to play offensive rugby primarily, but he loves to put big hits in too. Whereas Henshaw and Farrell off the bench, to be fair, are centres who think first and foremost about defending.
Yes.
And so that's definitely a challenge for them. With the power that Vakatawa has had, they're going to be flying out of the line trying to make killer reads, and it's up to Ntamak and sort of the distributors in that midfield, with Vincent coming in as well, to try and make the most of that. To support each other, perhaps paint a little bit of a deceptive picture, to perhaps take some short carries on the inside first, check those defenders' runs, and then support each other. Like if Henshaw or if Aki are getting a hold of you, having a forward even or someone off the shoulder to take a pass and offload and keep going, could be vital, because you can make mugs of centres for being too aggressive as well.
You can,
from a defensive point of view.
And France have the kind of game plan and the kind of traditional running rugby that can create.
Well, it can go one of two ways. You can get smashed behind the gain line, or you can put a guy into a big hole.
Exactly. And they'll certainly be trying to do the latter for the most part. But it'll be a big job. Like, obviously Vakatawa is danger city. They'll be trying to get him to sit down some of those defenders and get a bit wider. But it still will be a huge job for them in the tight, to be honest. That's where they've lost these games against Ireland before. So the likes of Captain Olivon, who's been brilliant this season, Paul Willemse, all of these guys need to make their make their carrying game count. And force Ireland back into contact.
And get some offloads going.
Ireland don't like the avoid
speed.
The rucks, try and keep phases going for multiple passes in a phase, move the Irish guys around, and create their picture. Good running rugby, and against a buckled Irish defence rather than a disciplined, focused one.
The other thing they should consider, if they aren't getting as much purchase with that speed game and things are slow, there is purchase to be had against the Irish defence with little chips, and it's not something like... France are almost a team quite in the mould of this Racing team that have done so well, except in the difference that Finn Russell brings so many attacking kicks.
Yes,
he brings such a variety of them, and it's such a weapon.
Well, we've seen Ntamack do a little bit of it for Toulouse, a little bit of chips over the top, just not quite as often.
I haven't really seen him do it in blue, and I think you saw in the England game the blueprint to stop the Irish defence is there for everyone to see. I mean, you're going to have their back three. Stockdale is a virgin fullback in many respects at this level, and they have their 9, Conor Murray, in the defensive line, usually in the wide channels, part of a brick defensive line. Where's the space in behind? And certainly I would love to see, be it Dupont or be it Ntamack, or even Boutier is more of a big bomb kicker, but somebody to put a little toe on the ball and to check that Irish defensive line and maybe even find some space, because England found tries all day with those kicks in
chipping
behind.
Over the top. And to be fair, the All Blacks can do it as well. Like, it's been a frailty in this Ireland defensive system, and then also in the backfield, as you say, Stockdale is a virgin fullback. It's a system that was kind of built when Rob Kearney was there, who was his kind of nous was kind of second to none in the international arena in terms of he could be alone in the backfield and cover all the space somehow. Whereas pretty much no other fullback in the world can.
He had a lovely read on opposition tens. I remember I saw an interview with him recently where he was talking about that very thing. He's always got an eye on the 10's eyes and what he's going to be doing, and he's reading them before they make their decisions.
Exactly, and it's a good poker player's kind of thing to do. Whereas like with any other option Ireland have at fullback, including Stockdale, or even if it is the other back three members of the pendulum, their defensive line is very numbered up. The space is in behind them. They should try and isolate that, and especially if Connors is all flying out of line and the centres are bringing that line speed. That's where the little kicks
check those runs. Absolutely. Exactly. A little aside just on that Rob Kearney interview. It's complete aside. I think it was an interview he did with Off the Ball, but he was saying from a fullback's reading point of view, he likes to read 10's eyes, and he says that every 10 in the game without fail takes a glance at where they're going to kick the ball before they kick it. Except for one, and who was that?
Finn.
No. In his career, I'll give you 2 seconds.
Oh, it's going to annoy me because I can't think of... Farrell? No. It was Dan Carter. Unsurprisingly, that's the 110. He said never even glanced. Would be completely bamboozled about where he's going to kick the ball or what he's going to do. And then all of a sudden the ball was there. Some of Kearney's worst performances from fullback
against
the All Blacks, that mighty All Black team. That's not.
He said he never had a read on them. Anyway, that's just a complete aside.
It's an interesting
going
one
back to the game.
Because I reckon even if they are dropping kicks on the toe, yes, they are eyeballing the space where they are. So try and keep an eye on that. That's a good tidbit for Stockdale if he's watching. But in terms of France, then they just need to not panic as well when they have the ball, because that has been a symptom. Like when things like if Connors is succeeding in chopping them behind the gain line, or if the centres are shutting them down a little bit, what can't happen is the knee jerk kick away aimlessly, or just
force something, shoveling shite and doing sort of the Racing picture against Exeter where they compounded their offensive
turning
errors
one error into 5 or 6 in
that's
response to just a disciplined defence.
Especially understanding the context that they're chasing a score. There isn't room for impatience, because if they're just flinging shite ball away, that's potentially going to play the great defensive reading of Henshaw and Aki into the game.
And you might see intercept tries and stuff like that.
That's the catastrophic picture, so they have to be calm.
Be aware of that and try and have their leaders
to be the guy who makes that happen.
Well, so himself and Olivon and Leroux, these experienced guys. They have Marchand, who's captain for Toulouse.
Dupont runs the offense.
He does run the offense.
He's the guy who needs to just make everything calm down and not have people throw stupid passes and take a leadership role.
Yeah, well, the leaders need to take collective responsibility for that. It's on them that kind of hinges, or otherwise. We've seen in the past some lacking French teams allow those errors to kind of get on top of them, and then you've seen the leaders, you've seen captains giving out to debutants. I certainly remember a Pascal Pape moment from years gone by where he fired a ball into touch himself on the debutant winger, had no chance, and then turns around and screams at him, and it's like, that is meltdown mode from your leader to your debutant, chastising him over something he got wrong. And it's like, that's obviously horrendous. I do rate this French team much more highly than that French team,
100%.
and they need to be a bit more calm, be patient, even though they are chasing what will probably have to be a big score to try and win it. Can't afford to get reckless with that, because Ireland will pounce on those mistakes.
And then just end your chance. That's 100% a concern for France. They need to be calm and they need to be controlled. In terms of when they don't have the ball, how to tackle the what Ireland are trying to do with the ball. It's an interesting one for them. I mean, Ireland's new style and new shape is very much in its infancy. They have moved forward pods a little wider than they used to do. Even off 9, the forward pods are a little wider. They're still struggling to get 2 pass phases going, but they are at least using the whole width of the pitch from an Ireland point of view.
Yes, they're not turning back on themselves once they reach the 15-metre line, which they used to do.
And they do have forward pods in the wide channels, or at least one forward on most occasions in the wide channels, which is definitely a good thing, but whether they can get it to them or not is another thing. I mean, from France's point of view, they have defended pretty well so far. They do have heft, they do back their tackling, they're not as soft in that area as they once were. And I definitely would expect them to be up to the challenge, and they're going to have to be up to the challenge of meeting Irish ball carriers, of meeting James Ryans and Caelan Darris's and CJ Standers, and not taking a backward step.
That's going to be pivotal in terms of how this game goes, because you know that Ireland probably will try and start off 9 and try. That's always the way it goes for Ireland. They'll try and build.
They're moving it a little wider, but it's still off 9.
Exactly, and it still involves winning those collisions first and foremost before any of the other offense seems to work. Which is frustrating from an Irish point of view, but from a French point of view, it means you know what to expect and you know what to prep. It needs to be those tackles, even meeting CJ Standers with 2 guys, one low, one high, smash him back. And as much as I don't think they have many expert poachers in this French team, in fact I know that they don't. Camille Chat off the bench is one, but for the most part it's not going to be their game, but you can still target the ball, try and force turnovers by just dislodging the ball in that contact. If they can do that, like, they are experts at transition, and Ireland will be tough to fold back into their shape if they can generate turnovers. But I think the way for them to do that is in the actual contact itself. A big swinging arm, stripping the ball, target it. Like, you can force hold up turnovers,
punishing loose carries for sure. I mean, they don't want to see a repeat of that 40 phase situation where they couldn't get the ball back. They couldn't get the ball back. They couldn't do it. Like, that was what happened 2 years ago, and took it 40 phases and kicked a drop goal to win that game. Right scrappy game, but with an epic finish.
And we've seen it twice since for Leinster v Toulouse, which was a similar picture as well, where Leinster just elected to hold the ball because they don't have many poachers, and it was tough
you
for
might
the French
see Ireland
team.
try something like that. Certainly, I think the new shape will be abandoned if it gets the minorest bit of resistance in terms of France start winning contacts and they can't get it out wide. I think it will tighten right up again, and they'll start. But they don't have the Tyke furlongs, that they had back then. They don't have Ian Henderson.
No, certainly Tyke Byrne in the locks is a little bit soft.
So from France's point of view, I think that's a winning picture. If they can get Ireland folding into that sort of shape, that's obviously massive for them. I think the other thing that's massive as well is the backfield. I mean, if they get any sort of victory or purchase from a defensive point of view, Ireland are going to pivot to kicking it to them. And they didn't box kick much last week, but they certainly wouldn't rule it out.
No, I expect to see a return of the box kick for the most part. It's just a
but even like the kicks that they did do were de facto box kicks just from Sexton. They were big bombs. Some of them were going too deep to be contestables, but some of them were in the contestable range. And from France's point of view, you know, playing Ireland into the game is not dealing with those. Is ended up, you know, dropping that ball or letting it bounce or all that kind of terrible stuff that you sometimes see from them. They have Gael Fickou and Rattez, which, you know, Ficou's good in the air. Rattez is short.
Yeah, he's certainly vertically challenged in that regard.
And Boutier, obviously, at fullback,
Boutier
pretty
is
solid.
Yeah.
But that's a massive job for those guys. I expect, like, if anything, Ireland are probably going to try and target Rattez.
Yeah.
And who's his opposite number?
Is it?
Keenan, young man
Keenan.
Keenan. Keenan's a fullback. Like, so that's a dodgy matchup for them. They might want to transfer Rattez out of that position and put Boutier in that position. I know they have to get the pendulum going.
You've got to get it going. I think Boutier is in charge of managing that pendulum anyway, so if he wants
to...
Well,
one of the things that can be of value for them is that if Ireland do anything, they tend to do it quite slowly and predictably, so you'll know where the kick is going long before it's in the air.
It's true. It's true. So, they just need to be savvy enough and mindful of that. But be physical without the ball and force Ireland into their narrow shape, force them to kick loosely back to them, and then pounce on turnover. That's going to be the French picture for them. Set piece then is quite an interesting battle. Obviously, as you said, there's no Tadhg Furlong, but there is a Tadhg Byrne because there's also no Baird, no
Ian
Henderson. So for Ireland, they're a little shorn of heft. They were a little vulnerable
they are a little vulnerable at scrum time, and it's the ugliest picture for me. I'm such a Cian Healy fan. I would hate to see his 100th cap spoiled by French scrum dominance, and yet I've never seen an Irish scrum more vulnerable to being dominated by the French. Not really since Cian Healy's come into the side.
Yes, yeah.
There is an opportunity here. France are heavier in the tight five. Their forward scrummagers, Cyril Bay and Mohamed Hoas, as hot-headed as Hoas can be.
He is.
I think he has a very good scrummaging prowess, and I think if they have their savvy about them, this would be a real area to dent Ireland's confidence and to really that would knock, because Ireland aren't really used to conceding scrum penalties at a high volume. Really, the last time you saw it happened. It was quite shocking to see it happen in the Heineken Cup quarter-final from a Leinster perspective.
Yes.
Being scrummed off the ball, Vincent Koch doing a job on Cian Healy. It's not a picture we're familiar with.
No.
But it's starting to creep in as Cian Healy gets on, and I think if France are wise, they'll target that scrum because it can break the back of the team. It breaks your confidence.
Well, we've seen it with Dev Toner in there in years gone by, that it's weaker in the second row in terms of rarely dominated, but not dominant itself.
Yeah.
And Tadhg Byrne is a similar issue there. He's kind of a back row come second row. He's a little softer. He's
also Andrew Porter is not. He's
not the scrummaging force. He's not the same force as Furlong. It's an area that France, I think, will be targeting. They do scrum for penalties, and they have the tools to do so. The line out then also very important. We've Herring's darts were good. And Marchand's also, they were both pretty accurate last week.
The line out takes on a serious significance, even more so than usual this week, because I certainly would expect Ireland, based on what I'm hearing from Johnny Sexton. Like I like Sexton's chat in terms of there's an understanding there that the 4 tries is what's needed. We're not about to be kicking threes. We're going to go to the corner and try and maximise our chances, because first of all we need 4 tries. So I think that Ireland are going to be kicking to the corners, and I think if France are wise, they'll be doing same as opposed to kicking threes. I just don't think that would be smart. In terms of racking up a score, it's just not going to do it in enough time. So I'd expect both sides to be chipping the ball in the corners, and then your 5 meter or 5 meter to 22 meter line out plays are going to be absolutely pivotal in terms of converting chances.
So maul offense and defense for either side, big jobs for the likes of Ryan. And actually Tadhg Byrne is a decent spoiler at maul time. That's one thing I would say. His line out prowess is pretty good, and certainly from the French point of view, they'll need Leroux stepping up. They'll need Willemse. Willemse is a big hefty lock. He's not necessarily the most flawless line-out operator. I think some of their lighter back row guys. You wouldn't
throw him up there.
No.
Aldred's a good line-out.
Aldred's a good line-out. Actually, their whole back row can receive in the line-out. So they need to mix it up and be deceptive with it. And then at maul time, I kind of expect Ireland to have a slight edge just in terms of the organisation of setting a maul.
Ireland's maul can be good. When Ireland are at their best, their maul is a nicely oiled machine where they take the line out and transitions perfect, and they pivot off the side, and very often they're hard to stop from 5. That's definitely a huge part of Ireland's picture. I think likewise what you call the third set piece, the restart, which is definitely fair comment. I mean, there's definitely scope for Ireland to get an edge here. You saw at the very start of the game France just being dialed out and Aldred dropping a ball from the first kick. ended in 7 points. That's definitely
you'd hope
something
on Super
Ireland
Saturday, Six
for.
Nations Day, that people aren't going to be switched off at restart time. It's something that you tend to see more in friendlies. Oh, it does happen. I'm not disputing that, but it's criminal. It's the kind of one that the coach will be absolutely lambasting you. Not just the first kickoff of the game or of a half, but like when you've just scored, the onus is on you to exit your territory. That's got to be the dialed in focus of every single guy on the team that's just scored. So dropping a ball cold off the restart is just criminal. It is in that context. So hopefully we will see Ireland manage to put a little bit of pressure on them, maybe ask that question, but I'd expect both teams to be pretty switched on for the restarts, and for the most part
there are two sides that have struggled with them. Ireland have struggled with England's restarts. They tend to set up a very narrow scope for exiting, and they still haven't quite figured out, if they're bottled up inside their 22, how to get out of there. Chances are they're going to Murray box kick and not do it that well and give France the in. And likewise France, they sometimes turf the ball, they sometimes get mixed up, they aren't too comfortable being deep in their 22. So I think either the scope is there for either side to really attack the restart. And I think you could see either one of them getting an edge.
Certainly, it's one thing selfishly from an Irish point of view is just our exit play. Mix it up, for God's sake. Like England did their homework on it in the World Cup year. They knew that Murray box kick is the way they exit. Murray's a right footer, so put him on the right hand side of the pitch, so it's an out to in kick. It's tougher. They just did that straight away, and we just box kicked it, played into their hands. Why do you not pass it to the other side? If you're going to box kick it anyway, pass to the other side so the right footer is curling into touch so you can get a bit more purchase. You just need to have a bit more confidence to move the ball. And hopefully Ireland will. They showed a little bit of that, but albeit against Italy last week, it would be nice to see us vary our exits. Like certainly if France are expecting the box kick,
one of the
deception
ugliest pictures in Ireland rugby in recent years has been Ireland setting up a box kick, and you can see the opposition centres through right wing. Like if they're on the right side of the field, you can see the defensive centres and outside backs all drift into the backfield behind the fullback. And you're like, hang on, open space, and they box kick it anyway. And
heads up rugby, please. No, that's a selfish
heads up
Irish
rugby's
one.
been a talking point from the Ireland camp this week. They've been trying to hammer home heads up rugby.
Read the space, because France will leave you some ins. They tend to on defense. They can switch off at moments, and it's up to you. The onus is on you to recognise them. Otherwise, it's all for nothing. They can get away with switching off if you're not going to try and punish them. But I think given the scenario, both teams will be dialed in to try and score points. Then with Ireland, when we have the ball, I guess when Ireland have the ball, the onus is on them to score tries. So we did see last week a kind of industrious new style of play, different pods, as you said, slitting slightly further off 9, little tip on passes. Certainly Peter O'Mahony's offload at the end of the game off the bench was nice, beautiful to see, and albeit against a fractured Italian line, but still great to see a diving offloading pass from them rather than just going through the ruck. It's been a bone to pick that I've had with Irish rugby in general, is just the perspective that a ruck or a breakdown is safer than a pass. It's just not. It's not true at all. But the notion that an offload is a risk and a ruck isn't is crazy.
Rucks are risky. Rucks are definitely risky, especially if you're isolated. That definitely needs to be dialed in. I mean, we saw from Ireland like I say, we were talking about their pods mixed up across the wings. Forward spread out across the pitch. That's definitely they definitely have a decent shape to them. I like the spacing of the first forward pod of 3 at the moment. They tend to be quite wide apart. There's options for Murray to pick either one of the 3, and there's options usually for the middle guy to flick it out to the 10 from that forward pod. It's a pretty rudimentary shape, but I just like that they're doing it a little wider, and it's less predictable in that way. The key really in offense for Ireland here is speed rather than slow, methodic 40 phase rugby, because I think France are going to be ready for that, and they're going to be determined to get it right this year. And I think in terms of the actual personnel in the Ireland team, they're less suited to that game. Daragh and Byrne being in there in particular, and even Connors, they're rangy, young, quick guys. And they're better off being in a bit of space because they can all put a bit of footwork on, they can all link up and offload. And so definitely they're better off operating with speed so that they can generate a bit of space, moving in wider channels, and then get a bit of purchase on the ball. So quick ruck ball would be massive from an Ireland point of view.
Which means Murray needs to get a fire under him and start passing crisply with speed, because he hasn't this season or the last 2 seasons.
And that's the other thing. I mean, if you look at Ireland, especially without Ringrose, like they have pretty shapes in behind that first pot of forwards and Sexton, but it doesn't really get outside there, to be honest. Like the times that it does, it's a planned move where Robbie Henshaw moves into first distributor or Bundy Aki moves into first distributor, but always the killer pass in any given move is going to be played by either Sexton or Murray at 9 or Gibson Park when he comes on at 9.
Sometimes. Actually, we did see one from Henshaw for Keenan's try last week, but
here's what I'll tell you, man. Like that try, this is the thing, like I think that Ireland's passing game has been holding them back in a lot of ways, and that try is getting credit. If you rewatch that try, every single player who throws a pass, including Henshaw, catches it and throws it standing still.
Yeah.
Like that try is never being scored at the top level.
Yeah.
But you got away with it against Italy, but you could literally catch, look up and pass. Like obviously you're more likely to get that right.
Yes.
But the skill levels that have let Ireland down is when they're trying to pass on the run. Well, when they try and get specifically one of the centres, Aki or Henshaw, to pass on the run, it tends to be not a great pass. And I still think when they try and get it wide, they'll just try and work Sexton wider and have him throw the pass.
Yeah.
And that's still a dynamic that's going on with Ireland. And Murray's in there as well, and Murray can definitely throw a killer pass in a playoff 9.
Yeah.
And I definitely would love to see more of that from Murray.
Yes.
Like a real biting, flat, quick
certainly
pass.
Before, like in 2018, he had worked in that Aaron Smith kind of lovely, quick, crisp, wide passing off 9. So you can play off 9, but with variation.
Speed and width off 9, it can be good.
Yeah, exactly. And it moves the French around. It creates that deceptive picture. They've got to back themselves. Certainly, I think Ireland will be thinking that the last quarter should be theirs on a fitness level basis. They tend to think that about against the French. So like you want to try and test them and run them around, run them ragged first to have earned that right. Because you can see, like you only have that picture when you earn it. Like if you don't ask any questions for the first 60 minutes, then they'll still be there in the fourth quarter shutting you down. So you've got to be probing, you've got to be brave. Certainly courage is needed to try and go wide, try and get the scores that they'll need to win the tournament. It's a great as you highlighted, it's a great test for this Ireland team. They have to go in, they have to go away from home against France and score 4 tries. They've got to win with a 4-try bonus point to secure
I do like that there's guys having options to try things. I like that Peter O'Mahony was incentivised to throw that offload. I think Bundy Aki is in brilliant form and can flourish in that environment. Like we criticise some of their long passing on the run, but Bundy Aki in particular does bring a real threat.
Yeah, his running game is
Arthur
awesome.
Vincent coming into that French team. If Bundy Aki can get off the shoulder of a forward or off the shoulder of Henshaw,
between Ntamack and Vincent, there could be some space.
They're not the best long pass forwards, but both of them can win a contact and throw an offload and pick a line off each other. Like penetration through the middle, winning contacts, and then linking up. There is scope for that centre partnership to be a real handful for Vakatawa and Vincent, the sort of new disjointed pair to deal with. So I definitely think I would love to see Ireland try that. I would add the caveat though that at the end of the day, I think this Ireland team are less likely than Ireland teams gone by to take it through 10 plus phases. I think if 5 or 6 phases go by and their probing moves haven't worked, more often than not they're going to try and set up some form of kicking play. And we were talking about it from a French point of view. I think they will try and target Rates in particular, but also Fiku as well, just putting good quality kicks in there. Like, I think from a tactical point of view, as much as Ireland need 4 tries, I think in the back of their minds they'll be thinking it's not the situation where you need 4 tries against a team that can shut down and you have to create. It's when you need 4 tries against a team that also has to score big. And do we have a better chance, focusing a lot on our defence and just putting France under pressure, putting them into difficult situations under pressure, and then allowing them to make mistakes that play you into the game? My suspicion is that they might be focused on doing a bit of that. Like they might be looking put high bombs up that put them under pressure, make their ruck ball messy and make them make mistakes.
Yes, because they are more mistake prone, certainly when they're in compromising positions. That's what Ireland will back themselves in terms of nous over this quite young French team.
So in terms of try scoring, I think the line out drive is obviously massive.
Yeah, we've kind of seen it disappear a little from the Irish game for a lot of recent years. They haven't been quite as clinical off it. I would like to see a return to, certainly if you're going to be kicking penalties to the corner, which I'd imagine they will be, you need to be clinical off your line out drive. You need to execute from 5 metres out pretty flawlessly. So we'd like to see that transition done very well. And hopefully some herring tries.
Indeed, and pivoting on to sort of what Ireland we need to do without the ball, it sort of builds on that point I was just making about putting France under pressure, because as dangerous as France are in the chaos, and this is something that constantly gets said, a French team that's forcing it, a French team that knows they need to win and is a little bit on the back foot.
Yeah, they're just as likely to concede a score as score one.
And that I think that's going to play into Ireland's plan a little bit. I think they're going to try and fly up a little bit. The two centres are going to go up and try and make things as awkward as possible for Ntamack, who is going to be feeding Vincent and Vakatawa. And I think if they get that a little wrong, the likes of Aki and Henshaw are going to be dying to pounce on it. And I think Will Connors is going to be in Ntamack's face in particular all day long, causing him to have just none of the time that he had against Wales.
Yes, well that's got to be the picture. Pressure is a huge part of Ireland traditionally in terms of their game plan, and then more specifically if they need to create those scores. Well, as you say, what's statistically more likely? Are we going to get into a shootout, knife fight with France and go toe for toe? Like in Paris, you're going to lose that game.
Probably, unless you can force them to try and create that shootout and take defensive tries. I mean, I think an intercept try is a big part of what Ireland are looking at.
Yeah,
if Ireland's planning for intercepts, but you're just planning to put them under pressure.
If your plan is working, a symptom of it is an intercept try. And Aki, Connors brings pressure, Ntamack flips it on. Aki brings pressure, Vincent flicks it on, and before it gets to Vakatawa, Henshaw's in with an intercept. That kind of thing. It's a sign of good pressure. And
the French are almost allergic to catching a loose pass way behind the gain line and just conceding the play and take the sack, as it were, in NFL parlance. They'll always try something. Well, not always, but a lot of the time they'll try something. If they're on the back foot, they'll try and like a little chip or something mad, or they'll just kick it away. And that is where Ireland could get their purchase on. So I think it's very much a pressure-based defence.
Yes.
But that does start with winning that contact.
It does, and it also means you can't, Connors is obviously going to be flying up towards Ntamack, and that's right and proper. The onus is on the pillars and the tight men to watch Dupont, because Dupont will be aware of that, will be looking for the space. You can't drift off, you can't get too aggressive and be caught found wanting.
Somebody has to have eyes on that boy
all the time. Every single breakdown Dupont needs to be watched. It can't afford for a Kiwi kind of style where the scrum half's already over here looking here and then the scrum half straight through.
If your setup is tired Cian Healy, if let's say for example you have player Will Connors, and your shape is Porter at pillar, Cian Healy looking tired in second receiver. Dupont's going to isolate that in a second, and what he's going to do is he's going to pick, run sideways and shape the pass, and then take the outside of Cian Healy, and he'll do that 100 times out of 100. He's like, that is a really dangerous one for Ireland. So that's where France, if they can generate that tempo, I think where it starts with Ireland is not allowing them to generate that tempo. And that has to do with working the contact, making sure that the ball doesn't come back quickly, affecting as best you can without giving away a penalty away the ball placement of France, just making everything awkward and winning those tight scraps. And that's where it's really on the likes of CJ Stander, who's a really good poach player himself.
He is.
To get on top of them. I mean, he really makes his name in defence.
Well, they actually, as far as poaching is concerned, in terms of making the breakdown a scrap, Ireland between Porter, Tyg Byrne in the second row, Herring even, and CJ Stander and Connors then in the back row as well. Even Daragh has picked off one or two, but it's not normally his main game. But they actually have poachers throughout the team, whereas France don't typically. They have more rangy runners. So they will be trying to upset the breakdown, generate turnovers, but first and foremost slow the ball, make it a mess for France, because France don't like playing slowly. If the tempo is going to be key in terms of how this game's going. If it's quick and helter-skelter, advantage France. If it's a bit more slow and methodical, you kind of think advantage Ireland.
Yeah, although the other factor that can't be overstated is Boutier's boot.
Yeah,
and that's something that
useful exit plan.
Well, we saw his kick against England when they were out in Paris at the very first one in the season, where he kicked it from his own in goal to the 5 metre line. He kicked it the length of the field.
Phenomenal.
And he's got a fantastic boot on him, and he does eye corners.
Yeah.
Like I always want my kicking players to do. He eyes the corner, he eyes pinning it back.
Yeah.
And with Stockdale, we were talking about as a virgin fullback, being aware of that and having to stand that little bit deeper to be mindful of Boutier, especially when they're on exit, is going to be very important. But it might open up the space for France to try the little dinky kicks. So Ireland are going to have to make some adjustment to be aware of that. Otherwise there could be pain.
Well, for sure. Well, when you know both teams are going into it with an onus on them to score points or be like a score or die kind of scenario, defences are obviously under huge pressure from both perspectives. So then, with all that said, what do you think's going to happen?
I don't know.
Have you your green goggles on, or are you feeling a bit more melancholy about Ireland? Who knows?
Is that the mindset? I don't know. I'm looking at the game. I see a very good French team that are very good at scoring tries, that I also see weakness in if you can put them under pressure, for sure.
Yeah. They're at home, despite the lack of fans.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
You're going to pass the buck on to me.
Yeah,
but I normally vote with my heart, and that would just have Ireland comfortably win with a bonus point, no questions asked. It's grand, like.
Yeah.
Even if I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't know. I think that Ireland will play tighter enough and try and exploit the French mistakes, and then I think the outcome of the game is dependent on France's ability to execute under pressure.
Yeah.
And not make mistakes and punish Aki and Henshaw when they come out of line, and find Vakatawa in space and link well with each other and exploit them when they get finished tries, when they get line breaks. And they're usually quite good at doing that this year. And yet, there is a part of me that thinks that Ireland could do them. Like, there's a part of me, like that Scotland game, that thinks, they can be got at, this French team. So I don't know.
It's a tough call. We're always tough to predict when it comes around to the Ireland fixture.
I just think this is actually a good matchup.
It's a great
in terms
game.
of two teams. It's just a good matchup. If they both have to be hunting scores. France, they lost to Scotland.
Is there a chance that Ireland score 4 tries and lose the game?
There is a chance of that. It's unlikely, but there's a chance, I guess. I don't know what to predict, man. I don't know what to predict. I suppose I should say something, but I'm not committing to anything.
Yeah, you're not. I'll say that Ireland win with 4 tries and take
win the Six Nations.
Take the Six Nations.
That'd be nice.
That would be lovely. Or they could do the Connacht style thing and score 3 tries in a losing performance and not get a point out of the game.
Maybe France will do them.
France definitely owe us some pain for the last few years.
They do. I wonder what kind of mindset they're going to show up in if
England have already
knocked them out, essentially. Like, they're going to be bigging themselves up all week, and then England are going to put 70 on Italy or something, and then they're going to know basically by kickoff that they can't win the Six Nations, when basically all they've been telling themselves is that we're going to go and win the Six Nations, and that they actually did screw it up against Scotland and Murrayfield, and then it's gone. Yeah, I'm leaning towards an Ireland win of the match, and then will they get a bonus point? I don't know. I'm leaning towards an Ireland win somehow, even though I know France are favourites. I just think they can be got at. That's my perspective on it. Well, so I think maybe an Ireland win, but a frustrating one where they don't quite do enough. Like, it's 3 tries or something irritating. I remember there was a few years ago when England had to beat France by a cricket score to stop Ireland from winning, and they nearly did, but didn't, and won the game, and Ireland ended up winning the tournament. And I think we might get a reverse of that. I think Ireland might beat them maybe 20. I think it's going to be decent scoring, so I think maybe 27-20, something like that.
Something along those lines.
But that's 3 tries. They kicked 2 2-pointers. Would you believe 2 3-pointers? Would you believe that?
Crazy.
How sick would you be with that?
I'd be very, very disappointed if that's the case. No, Ireland with a bonus point going to win it. We are an Irish podcast. We're going to vote with our hearts and say that that's going to be. Maybe like law of attraction. If we keep saying it, it'll just happen.
Ireland in the World Cup semi-final. Ireland in the World Cup.
Alright, with that, we'll move on. Because, of course, the Six Nations ain't all. we have Bledisloe. The curtain raiser
What
for the
a
whole
weekend.
Saturday. What a super Saturday it is. We move on to Bledisloe 3, this time on Australian soil. The Tri-Nations kicks off. Tri-Nations 2020, obviously a new look Tri-Nations with no Springboks, but the Argentinians in there with them.
That's right.
But this game going to be kicking off at 8:45. That's British and Irish time.
In the morning.
In the morning, AM, 7:45 local time. It's at ANZ Stadium in Sydney, and it is going to be refereed by Ben O'Keefe.
Kiwi.
I like Ben O'Keefe.
Yeah, they're they're still going with the
non-neutral refs because they're trying to keep it all I kind of understand
it works in rugby better than perhaps it would work anywhere else. I genuinely don't think the refs
try to exercise bias
yeah,
at all. I think bias happens in terms of just like crowds can influence refs and that kind of thing. For sure, like if you have 60,000 people baying you for something or just howling offside, then the offside call ends up being given. But they don't try to they don't try to act.
You'd wonder if it's a personal opinion thing. But you can look at it's better than having like a perfectly neutral Roman Poit in there.
Yeah, well, this is it. You can neutrally ruin the game easily if you're just making terrible decisions. But yeah, in terms of the colour of the game, as we said, first fixture in the new look Tri-Nations, first of 2 home tests for Australia. They've done their campaign over in New Zealand, got a draw and a loss out of it. Like that's about as good as they sometimes would have expected in recent times.
It's also do or die for the Wallabies. Nothing but a win will do for the men in gold.
If they want to keep this Bledisloe alive, they've got to win.
Yep.
That's just the equation for it. And I like simple equations like that. Backs to the wall stuff creates a good dynamic.
The 16-all draw on that opening day is going to give the Wallabies the confidence that they can go toe-to-toe with the All Blacks if they hit their strides, if they manage to be at the peak of the game and are managed to be physical enough to step up and handle those big All Black runners. They can match them, and there are tries to be found against them if they hold the ball and they're accurate. But then the big defeat in Eden Park would serve as a reminder of what can happen.
Yes, indeed.
When things don't go well and when they don't front up physically and when they don't mind the ball, it can spiral.
Things can be spiraling.
And I tell you, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I don't think All Blacks were as sharp on All Blacks as they can even get to, based on what you're seeing in years gone by, and even what we saw in Super Rugby Aotearoa. They're still making a lot of handling errors.
Yes.
And I think if the Wallabies give up as much ball as they gave up in that game again, it could get even uglier. So that is definitely an area of minding the ball.
Definitely a dynamic. Just in terms of the squads, the Wallabies
big changes
in both of them. Yeah, the Wallabies have gone with James Slipper retains his place, as does Paenga Amosa, but Alan Alatoa comes in for Tupou as starting tight head,
which is one I totally get.
I understand
bench impact. The second half in that second test in Eden Park, they were losing the conditions pretty consistently by the end of it. Yeah. And I think having Tupou be able to come on and bring his dynamic footwork and his raw physicality and his speed is just going to make a mountain of difference.
It's
to that
useful
tight
that they need to be able to compete in that last quarter, so it's obviously what they're targeting. Then Loto and Phillip retain their partnership, quite a young partnership, fledgling thing. I'm a big fan of Matt Phillip. I think he's a very, very good player. Still have my doubts about Loto in terms of the top level of physicality needed in locks, in the lock position, especially against a very physical All Black side. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, as has the Wallaby coaching staff. They get another run out. Ned Hannigan retains his jersey after a pretty impressive showing, probably his most impressive Wallaby showing.
He had his moments for sure.
He had his moments, and then Michael Hooper and Harry Wilson complete that back row as well, same as it was last time.
Still no Pete
Samu back, which is a shame. And then Nick White will partner Noah Lolesio. Lolesio, even I should say.
Lolesio. And you remember the name because this guy has been
brilliant for
the hype train that has followed this guy now since even before he made his final appearance for the Brumbies, which was stellar. This is an absolute raw kid getting a test debut, starting against
as tough as it gets.
All Blacks. I think it's awesome in Sydney in front of. I think there are going to be fans there. I think Australia are more or less out of lockdown entirely. I'm not sure if they have limited capacity or what, but they're going to have home fans in front of them, and he's going to be partnered by Ire Simone in the centre with Jordan Pataya, and I think himself and Simone coming in is ballsy. It's 2 new guys, obviously in the absence of O'Connor, who picked up an injury, and Tuamua
who also picked up a long-term injury. So they're
But what an exciting three-quarter line. Like, it's ballsy as hell. We don't really know what to expect from them, but there's attacking chops and there's youth and,
there's definitely distributing prowess. Certainly, Pataya showed himself to be a very good distributor of the ball. That being said, that one turnover that did lead to the Sam Cane try in the Eden Park test came from a loose carry from Pataya. So, like, in terms of, like, they are youthful and they will be trying to be vigor, but mind the pill, obviously. Turnovers for the All Blacks.
That's big. You could see it going badly as much as you could see it going well in terms of coughing up the ball and having All Blacks in their face. But, having young, ballsy attacking players in your team could go very right as well.
It could go very right, for sure. And then the back three as well. Corabetti and Daugunu retain their places on the wing, but in comes Dane Halep-Petty at fullback for the first time this year. I do like Dane Halep-Petty.
No Tom Banks, obviously. Reece Hodge permanently rooted to the bench.
He is seemingly the benchman at the moment.
Come on and kick a big kick. That's his job.
Scotty CO and Tupou covering the bench props as well.
That's impact. To be fair,
that is good impact. Rob Simmons and Fraser McWright complete the pack replacements. Then Tate McDermott comes in at scrum half cover, and Hunter Paisami as well finishes off that bench.
Yeah, interesting to see Paisami and Hodge in there. Like, well, both can play, I guess, either in the centre or the backfield. It's sort of no tens
one of
on
those
the bench.
Utility covers.
Is Hodge the 10 cover?
Hodge could be the 10 cover. I guess
Hodge is the 10 cover. That's interesting, isn't it? Gee.
Or Pataya.
Pataya doesn't play 10. No, Simone wouldn't play 10 either.
Tate McDermott in a 10. That's obviously not the plan.
Nick White
switching to 10.
I really hope we don't end up having to go down that rabbit hole. But there might be a bit of oversight in terms of 10 cover.
Well, they're backing
Lola
CO. He hasn't had any minutes so far. He's going to have to give them 80. Changes rung obviously by Dave Rennie and the powers that be.
Many of them enforced, but even so,
but still good to see a bit of depth, a good bit of rotation. That has been a constant bugbear of mine with everyone with Wallaby Rugby.
And I'm glad he didn't go back to Paisami and Pataya or any of that nonsense. He bought Simone in, who's an out and out 12, who's going to bring a little bit of speed and a little bit of heft and a little bit of carrying to marry what Lolosio and Pataya are going to be bringing outside him.
Yeah,
there's attacking chops there.
It's going to need a big game from Nick White, who's the experienced short haired in there.
Yeah, he needs control.
Control from 9 will obviously be pivotal in terms of how well the debutant at 10 goes or not.
Of course, and not to mention the pack.
The pack is where the game was lost, because looking at the All Blacks you can kind of see why. We have Tui Nukuafe
comes in to replace Joe Moody. I thought Hodgman did enough, to be honest with you, to get the starting berth.
Apparently not quite. He does retain his spot on the bench. Dane Coles retains his spot, which is interesting. He was obviously great in the loose. Little more shady at line out time than it had been the week before.
Cody Taylor definitely a better line out forward than he is.
Seemingly. And then Tuonga Fassi, who's been brilliant throughout this whole Bledisloe series. I'm a big fan of him. And then Tui Pilatu and the returning Whitelock brings a serious heft, and this is why I'm cocking a skeptical eye at Salakai Loto is when I'm looking at those All Black engine room. That is danger. And then Frizzell, Kane, Satutu getting the nod.
Hoskins Satutu
first start, I think.
No Artie this week, but that's great to see Satutu in the number 8 jersey. I think he's going to make it his own. I got to say Frizzell in there as well, and with Kane, who's been so bullish in the contact. That is a pack that is picked to bully the Wallabies. That's what they picked, that pack.
It is.
They haven't got the quick guys in there. They've got the big guys in there.
Yes,
and Satutu can do it all, obviously, and so can Sam Kane. But even Frizzell in there, that's just a hefty man they've gotten in to combine with Whitelock and Tui Pilatu and Tuonga Fassi. The only one who's more speedy than their contemporary is Dane Coles.
Yes,
but generally speaking,
he's not lacking for physicality either. No, they're a big strong pack.
Yeah.
And then the back line is good too as well. I think it's actually the same one as the week before. We have Smith, Moonga, Goodhue, Leonard Brown, Clark and Barrett. Jewel Barrett's and a Caleb Clark in there. It's potentially dangerous all over. Replacements then Taylor, as you say, or Taylor and Hodgman. And
Tyrrell
Lomax gets in as tight head cover. Scott Barrett, great to see him back as well in the picture.
Was Tupovi injured or is he dropped after making his debut?
I'm not sure. Not sure about that.
See him out of there.
Papali'i also getting in.
Dalton Papali'i making his debut from the bench potentially is great.
Yeah, he's been brilliant.
I really loved him in Super Rugby Aotearoa.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see what he does in an All Black shirt.
TJ obviously back in as perpetual cover at 9, and Laumape and surprising outside men. So we have Laumape and Rico Ioane as bench cover.
It's interesting. I really hope that they don't. Obviously Rico had a nightmare against the Wallabies in Bledisloe 1.
Are they going to slap
Hopefully
him on
the dust has settled now, but I really hope that they don't abandon Rico at 13 as a project, because I still have my doubts. As good as the All Blacks can be when they have go forward, and as good as all of their backs have in terms of catch pass
and just instinct
I think that from a creativity point of view and even from a combination point of view, that the centre partnership of Goodhue and Leonard Brown it's good but it's not that good. It's good but not great. That's what I'd say about it. It doesn't have that penetration that you would associate with All Black centres in times gone by.
Well, certainly your Sonny Bill, Nonu Smith with Sonny Bill off the bench kind of stuff.
Well, obviously they don't have that kind of talent at the moment, but even I think Rico in there showed some real positivity and some real signs of being a danger man from 13 in a way that neither Leonard Brown or Goodhue quite are.
Yeah, and I don't as much as I like that. Obviously Bowden Barrett is undroppable and Richie Mo'unga is in great form too. They haven't quite linked in terms of their 10-12 axis or 10-15 axis that much. They've both shown great heads up play and great footwork in individual moments and little offloads here and there, but it hasn't quite worked as a kind of a backline that unpicks things just on its own merit alone without being having the virtue of going through front football, which is where their dominance in Eden Park was built on, just the pack dominating the Wallaby pack. So that is really kind of the question mark. Then we'll move into just the winning conditions for both, or what both teams need to do. We'll start with the hosts, which is the Wallabies. So just in terms of what the Wallabies need to do when they're attacking this All Black pack, or this All Black team, this mighty All Black team, what do they need to do? What are you gonna look for? I kind of think a lot of it is the same equation as before. We were begging them to not kick the ball away cheaply. And as much as the personnel have changed, that equation remains the same. You can't kick loosely to the All Blacks. They will punish you. So you need to be confident and comfortable going through phases, being able to ask questions. Big forward runners need to kind of win some contacts and build some pressure. But I think one of the different focuses of this week, based on the last 2 weeks, will be the offensive breakdown. They need to resource that better, because in the first half, especially in Eden Park, they had great chances and the All Blacks just have great steals. They're
it's one of the dangers with the heads up thing, especially if players aren't dialed in. One of the things that makes this French team so great is the fact that they can play heads up rugby on the same wavelength as each other. You see that with great All Black teams as well, great All Black moments where they're playing heads up but they're all in sync with one another. Sometimes with the Wallabies they can get lost down a track of their own. Somebody like Daugunu will break a tackle or beat a man and then he'll be away, he'll try to put more footwork on, but he's not actually dialed with his teammates, and he gets lost. When he does go down, there's no teammate in sight. And so I just think being on top of one each other, perhaps working in at least pods of two, where they're always having eyes for each other and you need reading to watch each other and seeing what you're doing, especially with these young guys.
They asked a lot of questions at the beginning in Eden Park, and actually in the beginning of both tests, they asked some questions. But in the first quarter in Eden Park, Sam Cane, Ardy Sevilla and Frizzell had all got big steals that had all sucked the life out of the Wallaby attack when it had been looking good. They've done a lot of things in terms of ticking the boxes. They've won some, Philip has looked good in the carry, as has Loto. They've got a very decent ruck speed when they do manage to retain the ball. Their ruck speed's pretty good. The issue is when they half break the line, they manage to get through a hole and it's just a guy isolated on his own, and the All Blacks are really good at winning that turnover. They do eyeball turnover balls.
The other thing that the All Blacks managed to do was never ever be sucked in for the whole game last week. Every wide shot was just a black wall from ruck to wing, and that was a very difficult thing for the Wallabies. They simply didn't win enough contacts last week on either side of the ball.
It's true.
Speed and footwork is obviously the antidote to power at the best and worst of occasions. A lot of it's going to depend on the form of the new guys. I think Lolesio, obviously big question mark. Obviously he's a talent, he's in there for a young man. He's got all this hype behind him. How good is his distribution game going to be? We don't know. But Pataya has class footwork, and Pataya is like your old school he's very quick, but he's got great hands. He's very much in the mold of a classic 13.
Yeah.
And I think Uri Simone is in the mold of a classic 12.
Mm-hmm.
And if they are to get some purchase in terms of offense, there's definitely scope for those two linking up, for Simone running hard lines and breaking tackles, or getting a hand free and Pataya picking a line off him.
For sure.
That's the old centre picture that you don't see too much of these days. Roberts or O'Driscoll from the Lions in 09.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of look where you get the two guys in the midfield reading each other and picking lines off each other and punching their way through the midfield.
Yes,
I definitely would love to see a bit of that from them. But the work rate of the pack in the back row in terms of supporting that has to be massive
for
as well.
sure. Yeah, and the other thing is just turn those red zone visits into points. They can be 3-pointers, they can be 7-pointers, but they need to be pointers, because like too often at the beginning of the Eden Park test, they got themselves in great positions, great multi-phase attack, and it just ended in an All Black turnover.
You do have to execute some scoreboard pressure. I wouldn't I don't know what Lolasio's drop goal game is like, but I wouldn't mind seeing it if they're stalled in their half, just chipping one over and getting a mind to just getting points out of visits and punishing the All Blacks, because the All Blacks, they have been a little loose in these games, even with their success at Eden Park. But obviously the main thing is there's many main things, but one of the key things against the All Blacks, if you're ever playing them, is going to be your quality of execution.
Yes.
Making silly errors, making unforced errors that play them into the game, dropping balls, not minding the ball in the contact, turnovers. They're killers. They're what the All Blacks feed off. They're oxygen to that All Black team, and you need to starve them of it. You do need to mind the ball, and everybody needs to be dialed into that job of protecting the ball, presenting it well, getting it quick, but getting it away from potential steals.
Getting the steal, the turnover poach guy, getting him out of there, and also trying to fold the defence a little. It's been tough for them to do. They haven't done it even with some of the penetration, but Daugunu and Corabetti have shown themselves to be potentially lethal when they're put into that little bit of space. They need to try and manufacture that more. Obviously it's a big job. It's easier said than done.
They're probably going to work in bringing the blindside winger tight around the ruck as well. They like to get their wingers wandering, and certainly if the All Blacks are holding just a lot of width, it's something that they're going to have to work in as well, because getting their hands on the ball is key. And Corabetti not dropping the ball also key.
Yes, also key. Whatever happened to him in Eden Park, I don't know, but get him to hold the ball, maybe stick some super glue to his hands or something. But for sure, accuracy and execution pivotal for them. And then when they don't have the ball, it's a tougher task, to be honest. They need to front up and be ready for, they got away with it. They kind of got an inflated opinion in themselves after the first test and the draw. They got a lot of things off on defense. Eden Park was more the All Blacks to be expected, that's more what the challenge they should be expecting, should be preparing for, because they really got dominated in the contact zone. The All Blacks didn't even do much creative in the multi-phase. Didn't really have to. They just sent runners round the corner. Aaron Smith's tempo and passing was crisp and accurate, and it just marched them back. And then you saw a bandaged Philip going off at 60 minutes because he'd made like 20 odd tackles and he just could make no more. And they need their guys to step up in that area. They need to be physical, need to be ready and not surprised by
dialed into the chop tackles and not letting the All Blacks get any kind of go forward from those narrow carries.
Force them to be a bit more creative with it. Drive them back.
Exactly, but not even drive them back. They're bigger than you, but get low and make good tackles. That is absolutely key, especially when they don't have the poach threat necessarily that they could have with a Pocock in years gone by. It's absolutely on the Wallabies to just check the All Blacks defence around the fringes and force them to go a little wider. And frankly, so far this tournament, you've seen in the opening of that Eden Park test, I think Frizzell had a couple of drops. They had a lot of drop balls.
They did.
When they were trying to force the play. And that's something that the Wallabies should be looking to get them to do. Just by nullifying their ability to just run over them.
March forward.
That's about fronting up. That's about coming out of the blocks, understanding your task, getting out of the line and making hard tackles. That's
brave tackles. They need to be low. They need to be accurate. You can't soft out of them. You can't go soaking. Because that's exactly what this All Black team wants. If you have Tui Pilatu marching over you, that's a great All Black picture.
If you have Richie Mooney getting the ball after a couple of dominant carries and everything is go forward, and he's only got the good Hugh and Leonard Brown and Bowden Barrett and those lethal wingers to give the ball to and to get the ball to with acres of space. That's just it's a scary picture in any case. Like
very,
you
very
have
tough.
to make it scrappy, and you have
do.
to make them work for every inch, make them
Exactly.
work for every score.
Well, certainly in that first test, or certainly even in the first half, it took like they managed to repel them enough such that it was only Beauden Barrett making world class plays that got them into the game, which like you can't legislate for. He's going to make some plays against you, so you
bring him down when he's spinning through you.
Yes, indeed. But you're going to have to front up on the more like whatever about what Beauden Barrett does. Focus on what you can do. Expect the All Blacks to be bringing that physical, hard-nosed edge because they picked a mighty pack to try and run at you. The selection says it all. So your prep should be low tackling, stifle them at the source, and make a game of it.
Absolutely.
Then when it comes to the set piece, the scrum I thought was very, very interesting, particularly in Eden Park. I thought it was actually one of the areas where the Wallabies managed to hold their own for the most part. The only guy who struggled was Leilala off the bench for the All Blacks, who really got dominated in the second.
Scotty Seo coming off that bench for the Wallabies.
So the Wallabies have a very good scrum at the moment. They definitely do. And Alan Aldertoe is a very solid scrummager himself. No weakness at all. And Slipper, despite our forewarnings Bledisloe, we were worried because Slipper's been there for ages. And
he's changed his shoes. He's not slipping anymore.
Not slipping at all.
He's
absolutely keeping his feet. He's developed into quite a tidy scrummager and a very useful player in the loose. The Wallabies will be trying to get some things off. The All Black pack being as hefty as it is, and the engine
doesn't look likely.
I think more likely, and certainly with the tradition that it is, and with Ben O'Keefe reffing, I expect just clean ball.
Also, Leolala's lousy scrummaging has earned him the drop. He's not in the 23.
He's not in the 23 anymore. So they recognise scrums enough. Like even if the refs not watching, the coaches are. Like Leolala's one was there for everyone to see.
He was just kept slipping, and it's like it's a madness because they have the engine room to not go backwards even if you are under some pressure. So to not be able to lock a scrum down at all was definitely
from tight head. Terrible.
Mad.
No.
Leolala's out, but I expect nothing more than parity there. In terms of the lineouts, All Blacks has been good. Wallabies was better.
It was better. It needs to still be a little bit better than it was. The All Blacks, one thing I will say is the selection of Dane Coles. There were a couple of ones in the first half in Eden Park that went astray, whereas when Cody Taylor was in the week before, between him and Tui Piloto, it was just like a well-oiled machine.
Worth noting that Sam Whitelock wasn't in the team.
That's true too. That was a big noticeable difference. Sam Whitelock he is the All Black lineout. He's their savvy elder statesman.
As good as Tui Piloto is.
Exactly. So I expect the lineout to return to its magnificent form for the All Blacks, and it's up to the Wallabies to try and make something happen on their own ball. Certainly, it'd be nice to see some Brumbies-esque mauls for it.
The mauls they've really struggled to get the sort of dynamic motion, low body position, driving at an angle, moving away from the All Blacks' big forwards. They've really not been able to get anything.
They haven't.
Going.
They haven't really wanted to.
The quick transition hasn't been there. Like that's what the Brumbies did so well. Like up and then straight away you're into a maul and the ball's at the back, and then you're pivoting. Yeah, like that's the great maul that the Brumbies have brought.
They haven't really wanted to take them on there, but I think they should. I think they should try and surprise 100%. Them, try and force them to defend the set piece maul, because then it just at least it means the forwards are tied up. If you do it for even a few seconds before you go wide, it just gives your young backs more space and more time to play with. So I would like to see the Wallaby maul kind of make a return, the Brumbies maul de facto, such as it is, make a return and make some inroads. Then just to pivot onto the All Blacks, the visiting team, they know that one win will do it for them, close out Bledisloe for another year. When they have the ball, how do they go about making that happen?
Well, what they did in the second test was wear the Australians down with a lot of physicality. I mean, I think we've been critical on a macro scale of perhaps them leaning a little too much into the physicality and lacking a little bit in the creative department. But control, in terms of winning this game, controlling the collision zones and tightening up in terms of controlling the ball, limiting their error count, not dropping as many balls as they did, forcing the Wallaby team without that many jacklers to make a load of tackles against men who are bigger than them is very much the All Black picture. Aaron Smith can pick loads of good passes. He's usually got many different options, and they've just got a rake load of forward ball carriers who are dynamic and excellent. None better than Hoskins Satutu who's coming into the team.
He's going to be a good source if he can get him. He likes to hang out a little wide and link up, but then so does Dane Coles. There's all kinds of potential for them to get offloads and get in behind this Wallaby defence if they can start by dominating carries, then get the hands free. There's definitely all kinds of scope for strike runners. Certainly Beauden Barrett and the like, and Aaron Smith will be running good support lines all day. But the question mark is, like, generally you'd like to see a little more creativity, a little more verve in terms of just them unpicking without necessarily having to win several carries in a row before they create anything.
Yeah, you're not really seeing too much creative going on in the midfield in particular. And I think you're right to point out as well that the Barrett Moonga link hasn't really been there. Both of them have been there, but their link hasn't been that well.
I haven't seen Moonga pass to Barrett that often.
Yeah, there's been better shapes out there than this current All Black back shape, that's for sure. And most of what they're doing well is being done off chaos ball and transition, and then also when they're already dominating collisions.
Yes.
Usually getting the ball to Caleb Clark 1-on-1 or 1-on-2 is good enough for him.
This is it. They got a photo. Like, Caleb Clark was sensational last week, no doubt. Or not last week, the week before.
Yeah.
But like, a lot of it was from kick return. You got to think the Wallabies are going to learn that lesson and not kick to him so readily.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to kind of manufacture the scenario where you put him in space or put him 1-on-1. Himself and Bowden Barrett and stuff, try and get them running down tight channels together. It would be nice to see a little bit more variation in terms of the handling in the midfield. Certainly it didn't help that Goodhue didn't have a great game the previous week in terms of his distributing, because I know him as a 13 who's converted to 12, they do kind of like him passing the ball for a few of these moves. Didn't quite work that way the last time, so it would be nice to see him a little bit more dialed in doing that. But yeah, we're just asking for a little bit more from this All Black team. It's still pretty young.
Backline, yeah, for sure. I mean, frankly, I think their best avenue for winning this game is actually to protect the ball and work the Wallabies' holes off on defence.
That's true.
And keep making them make tackles against big players and keep the ball quick with Aaron Smith. Keep mixing it up, work short side, work open side, but have most sequences end in one of their many dynamic ball carriers running right down your throat. And I think having the likes of Papali'i, the likes of Scott Barrett, the likes of Laumape coming on off the bench is just going to be more and more of that very quick physical line picking runners attacking the Wallabies' soft shoulders.
Well, certainly,
that's very much the picture. It's almost a Northern Hemisphere style.
It is a very Northern Hemisphere style
with Aaron Smith as your general, with Richie and Bowden in there as well. So with really quality distributors putting these big runners in space, and they're all very quick as well.
This is true. Yeah, well, certainly the picture they painted in Eden Park was ideal. They forced the likes of Phillip to go through so many tackles that he had to be hauled off by the end. Also, Hooper had a couple of steals in the first half, but then was getting bumped off by Caleb Clark in the second, because you're just forcing those key men for them to go through so much contact that by the end they're not the same force as they were. So it's definitely going to be a big heads up, man for man. They're going to fancy their chances. So I think they will lean into the physicality with the ball and try and run them over. And then when they don't have the ball, similarly, it's like line speed and intensity. They brought it in spades in Eden Park, where they had kind of left it on the bus in the first week, whereas they came up out of the line, made it very, very tough for the Wallabies, forced the loose kicks that then led to Caleb Clark getting into the game, and Bowden Barrett as well, even in the first half. That's going to be their picture again. They got a taste of doing it wrong and getting a disappointing draw in Wellington, and doing it right and getting quite a good win in Eden Park, and they'll know which one they prefer, which one they'll be going for. So I expect they're going to bring a lot of pressure.
I'd expect them to bring some pressure down the throat of that young 10 Lolesio as well. Give him a baptism of fire, as it were.
Is it Sam Kane? It's probably Sam Kane. You're sending down his channel, and it's tough.
Or Hoskins Satutu if you're feeling
You could do Hoskins Satutu. I don't know where they'll put him on defense. It's interesting. They've kind of mixed that up.
I tell you, he's bloody brilliant.
He's very quick.
He's a jackal thread. He's a super tackler. He's actually sensational.
I'm just thinking in terms of the system, because I know Artie was on the wing a lot, doing steals out there sometimes as well. So it's up to them. I think Kane will probably be the guy tasked with getting after the debutant, because you'll want to let Satutu go roaming, whereas Kane will fancy it. I think, but pressure is what I think will be key in it. The other thing is I think they have more turnover men. It's unusual. It's an unusual dynamic in years gone by. Normally in Bledisloe, they're like, okay, watch the Wallaby, watch the Pocock Hooper, the Pooper Scoopers. Fardy even before were great steals, whereas I think actually the All Blacks have the edge in terms of steal and breakdown guys. Artie Sevilla drops out of the team, but you have Satutu in, who's a great turnover man. Their whole back row can turn the ball over fairly well, as can what am I talking about? The tight head. Fatuanga Fassi.
Yeah.
Sure, he was producing steals after 60 minutes in week 1.
That's right.
They are dangerous.
Frankly, Goodhue as well, and even a lot of these backs are very hefty and will fancy a steal in midfield if it comes their way as well.
So if they're going to try and isolate runners,
physicalize and pressure the Wallaby team into making mistakes without making many yourself.
So there are no cheap high shots, no cheap
don't play them into the game,
exactly,
and keep them under pressure. And I think the All Blacks are going to be in a good place.
Yeah. So with all that, what are you thinking?
I like the Wallabies. I like the cut of young Lolasio's jib in there. I think there's definitely scope for potential. I like him and Iri Simone. I'm hoping for a competitive game again. I'm hoping for the Wallabies to show up. It is a big stand in front of their home fans. Hopefully they can put some offensive, give the All Blacks some offensive pressure and get some tries. And that'd definitely be the nicest
the longest precursor to a butt I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, listen, ultimately I think the All Blacks will win.
Yeah.
I think they'll win the game, but I'd like it to be close. I'm debating with myself whether I'm going to give them a big win. I said they'd win by 20 plus last time, and they won by 20. And they should have won by 20 plus. And they coughed up a couple of opportunities. But this one in Sydney, I think I'm going to go under. I'm going to take the under on 20, and I'm going to hope, and I'm going to say optimistically, that it'll be a decent scoring game.
Yeah.
So I'm going to think maybe the All Blacks, something along the lines of like 34-22.
Okay.
There's a scoreline for you.
That's a scoreline, very specific. I like it.
Yeah.
But potentially I would
give
love
or take
to see
2 points either way.
Yeah. I'm going to say the All Blacks just edge it in a 1-score game and have to dig it out last minute after a surprisingly good Wallabies showing. That's what I'm going to hope for.
So we both have faith in Lolasio to do some stuff,
yeah,
essentially.
That's what I'm hoping for. I would love to see on Australian soil them make a test. To be honest, what I'd love to see is the Wallabies to win it and send it to a final.
That's what all the neutrals want.
Yeah, exactly. Let's have it. Bledisloe 4. Let's have it be the pivotal one.
Yeah.
It hasn't been for years.
No, I don't see that being the future of it. But I think the Wallabies will give them a go, and hopefully they'll put some stuff together and give them plenty to think about, because they got talent to burn.
Yeah.
They really do.
Yes, they do.
But I think ultimately the All Blacks is just a bigger, better side.
Right. Okay. And so we move on to more domestic rugby, slightly smaller affairs. We are going to look back at the Premiership final, and congrats to Exeter.
The double.
The double
What is
was
it with
done.
English sides get the double done?
Yes.
Nobody else does, but English sides do.
Yeah.
How many times? Leicester, Saracens. There's another one that's done it at least. Wasps have done it.
Yeah.
And Exeter.
Yeah. 4
sides have done doubles. Yeah, it took Leinster forever to do a bleeding double.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I know, right? And then in France, it's a very tough thing to do as well.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, a double well earned in a very, very rain-soaked Twickenham. It was.
It wasn't the prettiest game.
It
wasn't Wasps picture weather-wise.
Wasn't ideal for Wasps at all. It finished 19-13. It was a very tight game. It was very stop-start. There were a lot of penalties, particularly in the last quarter. Both Simmons and Gopperth were 100% off the tee. 4 from 4 for Simmons and 2 from 2 for
Jimmy
Gopperth.
G.
And considering Simmons was at 99% going into the game, kicking stats, that's very, very impressive as a Premiership showing for a league man. The game's only tries were scored by Slade and Umaga. It's kind of suitable. 2 playmakers for either side managed to grab the try.
Yeah, 100%.
Umaga's in particular was quite impressive, because it was vital that they got it to keep the game alive at that particular point, and it was good. Like, Wasps really have been the form side since lockdown, and they showed what they're about, even despite the loss of Fekatoa, which was a loss.
For sure.
They managed to step up and really made a game of it. Ultimately, it came down to just Exeter were a little better at holding the ball, which is to be expected. Sure, in our preview, we were saying that Exeter are better at Wasps than holding the ball for those long phases.
Yeah. The weather definitely suited Exeter. I mean, Wasps had their chances, but I thought Exeter were just that little bit better, just that little bit more physical for the whole game. They always looked, to my eye, like they were going to edge the tight one.
Yeah, for sure.
And the Wasps, they did have a chance at the very end. Somebody was saying, because it was 16-13 at the time. It wasn't a 6-point game, it was a 3-point game.
Yes.
And Wasps had a penalty, and they elected to go in the corner for which everyone is roasting them. And frankly, to my mind, I was like, kicking 3 is a mental call, because you're only going to level the game. You're going to give Exeter a chance to launch it into your half and get a response, possibly a penalty to win the game. And if this game goes to extra time, Exeter look the better side, and they're going to edge it. Whereas now, if you go to the corner and get the try, you might win this game. You might do it here and now. And they did. And then,
it was one of the worst lineouts I've ever seen.
It should have occurred to them to jump when they had a line-out 5 to win the Premiership. It might have occurred to one of them to jump for the ball. No, what a catastrophe!
It was one of the worst.
Was a bad play.
It was one of the worst lineouts I've ever seen. As you said, I didn't hate the call at all. I think going for it was probably the right thing to go. It's a do or die mentality. It was in the rain. It was in Twickenham. It was. Try or bust, and I didn't mind that. But yes, as you say, jump. If you're going to throw the ball up in the line out, you need to jump for it. And they didn't, and it cost them. And Exeter ended up going up the other side and managing to get themselves a penalty to push the score out to 6 points with the last kick of the game. Just looking at the stats as well, there was it wasn't that pretty. There were 2 offloads thrown in the game, both by Exeter. Both teams kicked the ball from hand over 20 times. Exeter kicked it 26 times from hand. Wasps 27.
Yeah. So it was dictated by the weather. It was very much stop-start. There was some playmaking going on. I thought Stuart Hogg had a good game.
I thought he did too.
In finals footy.
Yeah, finals mode again. Yeah, no, it was one of those things where. Yeah, it was the game kind of, it all fell for Exeter. The stars have kind of aligned for them this season.
Yeah.
Like in a game where there were only 3 clean line breaks in the entire match. That's going to suit Exeter's picture more than Wasps, the high-flying, attacking, pacey guys that they are.
Coveted out as well, and Exeter did just dominate the collision zone. But I thought they were the better team. I thought it was a fair result based on the whole league. They finished top of the league.
Yeah.
They've edged most of these games. When their first team has been playing, nobody's really had an answer to what they're bringing. They remain the most clinical team in terms of executing in the 22.
Yeah.
That
asset for them was the telling factor in this contest, because it came down to hold the ball footy. Yeah. And they are excellent at holding the ball.
They are excellent at holding the ball, and you just got to give them credit. I mean, it wasn't Wasps' picture, but Exeter, on balance of the whole season, thoroughly deserved it, and it's a thoroughly deserved double for them.
Yeah.
And you got to give them credit. A 10-year project from being promoted to being European champions.
Yeah, it's been fantastic, and a lot of respect and time for the likes of Rob Baxter, who's given a lot to the club.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's come good this season as Sarries have fallen away.
Yeah,
it's funny how the dynamic has worked. Like, they've been the bridesmaids for so long, and then like in the week that they become double champions, a load of Sarries are caught drinking with the Barbarians and they're kicked out.
It's been something of an annus horribilis, and largely self-inflicted from Sarries boys, and last week was thematically appropriate.
It was thematically appropriate, and I'm sure Rob Baxter read about it with a little bit of relish as well, because he really doesn't like them. But
and the challenge goes on. I mean, it's a massive congratulations to them, and they have put a full stop on a magnificent season. It's a full stop to the longest ever domestic season. That started with all the All Blacks as world champions and pre-World Cup and everything else, and geez, the amount of time that's passed since then, and the season has finally wrapped up.
Yes.
But massive congratulations to Exeter, and now they have the challenge of being the hunted rather than the hunters.
Indeed. And actually Simmons as well got his European Player of the Year, didn't he?
Yes.
So
Sam
Simmons. So congrats to him as well.
He's the latest English European Player of the Year winner not to be in an England squad. He joins a crowded club in that department.
Indeed. I don't quite
it's
know.
not a good thing to win the European Player of the Year if you're English.
Yeah, because it just means you're not playing Test footy.
Yeah, Eddie Jones is going to drop your ass like that.
Yes, weird calls all aside, but it's been Exeter's year. What else can you say? Double champs. It doesn't come along that often.
No.
It needs to be celebrated when it does. Despite the weird year that it was, I'm sure they wouldn't trade it, and they're good value for champions.
Absolutely. Congratulations, Exeter.
And so we move on to the Women's Six Nations. Another Super Saturday was set to be
Super
going. Super Sunday, even, I should say.
By contrast, yeah.
But actually, that's disappointingly that has been spoiled because the Ireland-France game has had to be cancelled. COVIDed out.
This is a sad one. The French team have had a bunch of COVID cases apparently, and so it'll be not able to go ahead. It's actually quite a sad one because Ireland were scheduled to play away in France, but a lot of them weren't actually going to make the trip because this is still an amateur sport in an Irish context, and the rules of our government mean that if you go abroad at all and come home, you have to self-isolate for like 2 weeks.
Yes.
And so a lot of them couldn't do that. You know, they working in jobs, etc. They have families, etc. They have things that so they couldn't do it. It wasn't something that was on the table for them. And France graciously offered actually to just play the game in Dublin.
Yeah.
And so that was what they were going to do. They were going to go out to Donnybrook and play the game in South Dublin. And so I just think that's to the tremendous credit to the French team.
Yes.
And it's a shame that it hasn't gone ahead because the French girls now have COVID. It's terrible.
It's a bit of a shame because it does put a dampener on it. Just looking at the results from last week, obviously Ireland managed to get 21-7 win over Italy. Just about managed to get a try at the last second to push it out to that. Didn't disappointingly, they could have had a bonus point, but they kicked it out. But that I digress.
That wasn't the big story.
Wasn't the big story because Scotland 13, France 13.
It gave the championship to England.
It did give the championship to England, although they had already beaten France, had they not?
They had, but I mean, it won them the championship.
Yes.
I mean, they were going into the last weekend. They are champions, which means that thankfully they get to lift the trophy. Well, actually, it doesn't matter because they're going to beat Italy anyway.
Yes, they beat everyone. The English women are phenomenal. But there was that game called off last week, wasn't it? The England Wales game.
I think that went ahead pre-COVID.
Oh, sorry, that's right.
That went ahead pre-COVID. So there's 2 more games to be played now. Italy and Scotland are going to have to play in December, and obviously this France-Ireland game will have to be rescheduled,
possibly for December too. Yeah, we
don't
know.
So it's a mad old situation. Actually, it's not December, I should say. Oh no, it is December. Oh my god. December they're having to play that game, so the women are going to get back together a month later to finish off the tournament. It's largely decided. England have won now because of that shock 13-all draw.
Yes, which is fair play to the Scots. They shocked the French in Scotland with it. It was a tremendous
it's good to see. I tell you that the Six Nations table in the women's game makes for more interesting reading at times. Maybe not at the top, but at the bottom half than the men's. You know, where Italy are just perpetually getting beaten. Italy are like fourth at the moment.
They're more combative in the women's game for sure. They're a tougher outfit to crack in the women's game early, and it makes for a kind of more competitive, as you say, melee at the bottom. There is still the gulf between professional and amateur, and you can see that throughout. England obviously champions now,
although France have been a top team, and for Scotland to get that result against them is massive. But France having a fallow year does mean that England just run away with the comp. That's just the way it is. And we've kind of, certainly from an IRFU standpoint, we were a bit chagrined by it. They've prioritised women's sevens on the grounds that it's an Olympic sport, and they've kind of essentially doomed the women's 15 game to suffer and wilt and live
die.
in amateurdom forever,
which is just going to mean we're going to get routinely pumped by the likes of France or England. I'd say even France coming to Donnybrook, even though it was gracious of them, had it gone ahead, I'd say they probably would have pumped our girls, especially off the back of a shock draw. It's tough to see that gulf getting anything other than bigger at the moment, just with the way the teams are set up. But it's still a tremendous tournament. It's unfortunate that it's been affected so much by COVID, because the priorities of all the unions are for the money makers to take precedence, and it just means that this tournament has been kind of pushed along on the back burner a little bit. The main gripe that we have this weekend is just that Super Sunday is spoiled by COVID.
It's just any given Sunday, as it turns out. But looking forward to it all the same, and that's another thing that's
in terms of the games. Then Wales Scotland this weekend is going to take place at 4:15 local time in Cardiff City Stadium, and Italy are going to face England on Sunday at the Stadio Sergio Lanfranchi in Parma.
I reckon you butchered that.
I probably butchered it.
Looking forward to the 2 games, and that's nice to have rugby on a Sunday, and nice to see that the women are finishing out the tournament at least, if nothing else.
Yes, for sure.
And congratulations England on another win.
They champions
are
again.
The flip side of that coin is that the England women's team are awesome, and they are taking the game, dragging the game by the collar into professionalism.
Yes, indeed. Well, it's great to see what professional women's rugby can yield as well, because looking at certainly when I watched the Ireland-Italy game at the weekend, and it as great as it is, and I'll root for Ireland to win, and they got the win 21-7, and that's tremendous. It is literally like watching rugby from another planet, or rugby from 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's like watching a classic game from the 70s or 80s.
Yeah,
it's like watching that. Like the shapes are very rudimentary. Everyone is clearly an amateur. There aren't pro athletes, and it's a different game. It's arguably a hark back. But
But it
yeah,
just means
in
that-
the context of the modern world as well, it would be nice if they were further along the line in terms of getting
development. Well, certainly when you see England play France, which happens every year, you see a standard go straight up, and you can see professionalism, and then the All Blacks as well, the Kiwi women as well,
the
Silver Ferns,
Black Ferns,
they are tremendous as well. They're a tremendous professional outfit that look really good and make the game. Play the game at the level that you know it can reach, and then hopefully they can drive it to new heights. And the women's professional setup in the UK is tremendous. To be fair, a lot of clubs have a lot of really good, strong women's teams. Harlequins, I know, do it as well, and certainly a lot of the Irish women are contracted overseas.
Yeah, well, that's if you can get a pro contract, England is the place to do it, and it is nice to see them. Stepping it up,
supporting the women's game.
Yeah, congratulations, England! You're Six Nations champs.
Indeed. So we take a look back at South America. We pivot on, but international rugby again, but the Sudamericanos, Cuatro Naciones, or the South American Four Nations, as we know by our parlance, is over.
Translated that all by myself.
Well done. Yes, it is finished, and Argentina 15 are champions again. They have managed to do it. They absolutely pumped Uruguay in the final round.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Beyond doubt.
It was brutal. I was looking forward to it. We were bigging it up as a decider.
53-19.
Yeah. No, I mean, they looked back. The Argentina team finally clicked, and all of their passes were working, and they were getting their wingers in, their wingers off their wings, picking lovely lines. They were getting great offload games going, and they were just completely dominating the forward paddle as well. So they were scoring all kinds of tries, and
that's kind of the normal picture from these South American tournaments, is the Argentina 15 doing that. But that wasn't the main story. Despite them being champs, it was Chile.
Yes.
Chile went 2-1. They managed to get the win, a 26-13 victory over Brazil in the final
and they
try.
were much better than Brazil, as I suspected. Like there's a thought like what happened to Uruguay in their World Cup pool, where they were the flary team and they beat Fiji and put a bit of a shock on, but then got dealt a lesson by the more physical Georgia, who actually had been beaten by Fiji. And there was a thought that might happen here with Brazil getting the win, Brazil being the physical team. But no, Brazil weren't close to them. Brazil weren't
close to Brazil in terms of being the physical team. They didn't look themselves that way. They didn't really show up in this tournament.
Chile were brilliant. They scored some fantastic tries. They have a lovely little soccer style.
Yes, they do. They drop it on the toe a lot, and they convert from it. It's very accurate.
Speedy, quick, clever kicks. Get after them. Have good soccer skills then in terms of the play after the chip when the ball's rolling along the ground. They have great instincts for controlling it. It's just a lovely free-flowing South American style of rugby that they've discovered, and they are an absolute find. They're by no means passengers anymore. And
it turned out it was just that kick in week one, very at the very death against Argentina. They were that close to going 3-0 and being champions. Well done, Chile. We were billing them as the underdogs pre-tournament.
They were, as far as we knew, they were, but they've come out of the blocks brilliantly, and it sets up future America's Rugby Championships with the USA and Canada coming into this tournament as well.
Much more competitive.
Super competitive tournaments. It's exciting.
It's very exciting. And the Chile were the absolute finds. What's disappointing is Brazil. They seem to have stepped several rungs backwards as far as their physicality is concerned. They weren't far off World Cup qualification last time round. They might be further off now, especially with
there's a long way to go, and it's 3 games in a week, so it's hard to judge. But based on what we saw, obviously a while since they last played, their physicality was decent without being spectacular. Their discipline was shocking.
Awful. Some of the penalties they gave away, my God, they were terrible.
Duque at 12 had some slick touches, including the 2 drop goals that started the tournament optimistically, and a nice viral moment where he had a class little flick out the back. He's got sexy touches. He was definitely their brightest spark, but generally speaking, looseness, giving penalties away, tackling with poor technique and often high.
Even at scrum, which had been their strength, they were giving away as many penalties as they were earning.
Their scrum was gone. Their scrum by the end of the Chile game, they were losing scrums. They were actually getting physically driven back, and it was like, oh my God, they're completely not at the pitch where Chile were so dialed in. To winning this,
which was great to see. And then Uruguay as well. We didn't quite we knew that a few of their key men were playing overseas and weren't available for the tournament. It turns out they're a lesser force without them. Not wholly surprising.
The other thing is that there's good experience for the young lads in terms of this tournament as well. But like a fallow period, like last year was such a high in terms of I think they won a Grand Slam or close enough in the America's Rugby Championship. They won it. They did.
Yeah.
And then they went on to the World Cup and had a stellar World Cup where they got their win against Fiji. They were made a name for themselves, etc. And you know, to come down from that fever pitch must be massive.
Yes.
And so this is sort of a fallow year, a makeshift tournament where they can't even bring their stars who've gone off to play in the top countries.
Yeah.
It was always going to be difficult for them to rise up and perform to that level, those standards that they've set themselves. But yeah, they didn't. It is a decent experience. It's nothing to be panicking about. But
yes, it's good experience, exposure for some of the younger guys, and yeah, obviously understandable. But congrats to Argentina 15 for being champions again, and fair play to Chile, because that is the real takeaway.
Looking forward to watching those guys play again.
Delighted for them. Yeah. And we'll just move on and mention briefly as well, because Uruguay are up in action again. No rest for the wicked. They are up against Spain.
Yes.
In Montevideo again this Sunday, and it's going to be the first of 2 tests between those teams, which is very interesting. It's unusual that you see the kind of Rugby Europe and the Tier 2 from South America kind of mix in this way.
You want to see more of it.
You want to see more of it. You want to see more games for Tier 2 sides. So this is just a great fixture for all concerned with that. Uruguay obviously will be coming in a little bit more cooked than Spain, who have not played any rugby since the Rugby Europe thing was called off earlier on in the year. So you'd kind of expect that Uruguay will probably be a little bit more at the pitch than
and the other thing
Spain.
is that this match does take place in the World Rugby international window, so I would expect that the likes of Kessler and Berchesi and Arata should be available.
Yeah, whether they will be allowed or will they be strong-armed into staying?
I don't know.
I
think they should be allowed, so it would be nice to see those guys line out for Los Terros again.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you don't want to lose a game to the visiting Spaniards. Definitely not. There's kind of surely a little bit of bite between Uruguay and Spain. I'm going to create it anyway, just for drama. They hate each other.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
That's on this Sunday, and that's at 9 p.m. British time, 4 p.m. local time.
That's right. Yeah, so just another good Tier 2 match. Montevideo being the source of many
of Tier 2 rugby.
many good South American games. So yeah, we're excited to see that one. And we'll move on as well, because there are other things happening in the rugby world. We have the World 10s series. It's not quite 7s, it's not quite 15s, it's 10s. It's completely different.
Now, you watched this tournament and I didn't.
I didn't watch all of it. So basically it kicked off last Sunday in Bermuda. It's hilarious. Like, for those who have Sky Sports, the first thing you see is the guys all in white, like in a table, like a couch and armchairs, sat pitch side, covering the game in the sunshine, which is delightful. But it's got some quirky old rules. One of the teams pulled out and didn't make it as far as things. 7 teams made it as far as Bermuda, but then of the 7, the SX10, which is the Cape Town franchise, had COVID cases, so they couldn't play the first round of fixtures. There were each team played 3 games on Sunday, and then there was another round of 3 games on Monday.
Right.
All of those have gone ahead. So there's more matches to come over the next few weeks, which is interesting to see. It's just running on through. If you have Sky Sports at all for local
nice
viewers,
to see in the absence of 7s that something like this is going on.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no 7s tour going on, but they're all in one environment, in one sunny environment, and they're playing. So just a run through of the teams that are involved. We have the London Royals, which they're probably close to favourites. They're coached by John Brake, who's a former England Sevens player, and to be honest, it's basically the England Sevens squad, like Dan Norton and the guys like that, Tom Mitchell, AJ Davis even, and then also Ben Foden is involved with them as well. Good to see him, former great player. He was looking good in some of it as well.
Nice.
They are a team to watch. They are very, very well organised in terms of the Sevens look of it, and certainly I watched them face the Miami Sun, who are another team, and they outmatched them in the first game. But the Miami Sun, coached by Russell Earnshaw, have a few notable players as well. Nick Boyer, Troy Locklear, but DTH Van der Merwe from Canada is playing for them.
In Glasgow or somewhere, but look at that.
No, he's playing for the Miami Sun in Bermuda.
Was he looking any good?
He was looking all right. They certainly in the match I watched, which was them v the Royals, they were just outmatched. They were not as organised. But the Miami Sun definitely no mugs either.
How do these games play out? Not to interrupt, are they more like a 7s game or more like a 15s
It's
game,
interesting. Like there's space like a 7s game. They definitely can play out like that a little, but When it gets in tight, there's more scope for turnovers. There are 1 or 2 mauls that happen off set piece.
Right.
The fact that they're 10-minute halves, not 7-minute halves, means that fatigue is a factor.
Sure.
And there's a lot of drop balls. There were a lot of drop balls and things. It seems to be greasy because of the sweat, but also just because the ball in play time is so high. Humidity in Bermuda. There was a lot of errors, even from the London Royals and stuff. There were just drops cold into the open space. So it's a little different. Scrums are 5-man scrums.
Okay.
So it's a different again. It's a bit more of a set piece.
And is there driving going on?
There is, yeah. I've seen scrums one against the head because the team actually drives, whereas the other one doesn't. So yeah, it's got some cool dynamics like that. Sorry, just to run through the rest of the teams because I'll go through there's other interesting things to go through the rules. We have London Royals, Miami Sun, the Ohio Aviators, coached by Taylor Howden, with a few notable players like Christian Rodriguez, Nippy Guy. And Patrick O'Toole, who's a Dublin guy who's in playing for Ohio. Then we have the Asia Pacific Dragons, or the APD, as they were known for some reason. And they're a very interesting team. They're coached by Tutu Kefu, who was a Rugby World Cup winner and the Tonga coach at the World Cup last year. Notable players including Keith Marath and Lima Sonu Togo. Kurt Marath,
yes.
And Naikatani as well. They're kind of a mix of a few South Sea Island players and stuff. They have a good balance to them, play some nippy rugby. Then Phoenix, which is a Middle East rugby franchise, which is great to see as part of the thing. They're called Phoenix.
Right.
They are coached by Bram van Straten.
He doesn't sound Middle East, he sounds
South
African.
He sounds South African. They have Harry Barlow, Carol Kutsia, who's a cheetah, as a couple of players, Aston Fortune. They have looked a little soft so far. They have not been coping with the physicality quite so well, but it's still great to see a Middle Eastern rugby franchise.
That's cool, actually. Yeah, that is definitely cool.
And then Rhinos Rugby, who hail from California, who have the aptly named Rhino Combrink as their coach.
I suppose,
better man for the job. But they have a few notable players: Julian Dominguez, Patrick Regan, and Mike Teo. You know Mikey Teo.
Yes, I do know Mike Teo. He was class for a year for America.
He looked good for the Rhinos as well. They've also looked very, very good. And obviously the Cape Town franchise SX10 didn't play this weekend because of COVID. They're coached by Frankie Horn, but they have players like Collins Njira, JT Jackson, Cecil Africa. Ooh. So it was I was bummed out to learn at the very beginning that they weren't.
They could be the team to play the English.
They've just kind of cracked on without them, so they've missed 2 rounds, so they're on 0 points after 2 rounds of footy, which is a shame, but they could be there for exciting things. Then just the way this works as far as the thing, the scoring is different, so you have 5 points for a try. That's normal, that's all fair enough. But a penalty try also 5 points rather than 7, because teams get to kick their conversions from different spots. The drop goal and penalties are only worth 2 points in this game, and then there's conversion jeopardy. So there are several spots around the pitch where you can choose to take your conversion from. Right. The blue spot, which is 10 metres out, dead in front, is worth 1 point for a conversion. The orange spots, which are on the 22-metre line at about the 15-metre line, so at the angle, that's worth 2 points. Then if you move it to the yellow spots, which are on the 10-metre line and just outside the 15-metre line, that's worth 3 points. Or you can go from dead centre to the halfway line on the red spot. If you kick it over from there, it's a 5-point conversion.
Right.
And then you couple that with the fact that there are a few different rules. There's a captain's timeout, so you can call a timeout. There's also a challenge. So you can challenge. You have one challenge.
It's getting very NFL.
It's getting very NFL. You can challenge as far back as 2 phases, and if you are correct and it's overturned, you keep the challenge. If you're not, you lose the challenge, similar to NFL. Then you have a bonus point tries for 3 tries, not for 4, because it's only 10-minute halves, which is fair enough. And rolling subs, which the effect it had, the rolling subs was funny because I think it was actually Ohio. Or no, it might have been the Rhinos who kicked the first 5-point conversion, and the guy hadn't been he'd been on the bench, and they rolled him out for the 5.
So it is NFL.
Rolled him out to kick from the halfway line. He nailed it, and then got taken back off.
This guy's a kicker from college football who didn't get picked up by the NFL.
Yeah, possibly, but it just means special teams is essentially what they are.
It's interesting. It sounds like something that they've done to sort of tailor it to an American market.
Well, that was certainly one of the first things they said in coverage, is going, this feels like something that could crack the American market. which is optimistic phrasing of all of that. Certainly,
I think it's fun and kind of goofy, but I think it's great to have this in the absence of sevens.
Yeah, as an isolated tournament over a couple of weeks in a COVID environment, it's something you can do. It's a good watch. They're definitely fun games. It was unfortunate just that the humidity was such that there were a lot of handling errors. That's what I will say. But then just looking at the table after the few rounds, the Rhinos are sitting atop with 16 points.
So the London Royals, for all of your talk.
Oh yeah, they've only got 15 points.
The Rhinos are where's California?
Yeah,
on the
Rhinos with Mikey Teo and all those boys. They've looked very good. Then the Asia Pacific Dragons and Ohio Aviators on 9 points each. The Miami Sun on 8 points, and then the Phoenix and the SX10, who haven't played a game yet, on 0 points, and Phoenix, who've played 5 games but still have 0 points. Ooh. So the Middle Eastern franchise finding it tough to compete. But you're seeing in the Rhinos and in the Royals some really, really good, competent, like well-drilled rugby going on. And then with the APD and the Ohio Aviators, just some gutsy, lovely plays, heads of plays as well. Really good dynamic to the teams. They're all bringing something different. And Miami Sun, by no means mugs, but a little bit outmatched. Certainly, the game one, it was game one of the whole tournament was London Royals v Miami Sun, and they just couldn't get a thing off. They scored.
I definitely like it. It's great that they're ploughing ahead and putting something like this on for rugby fans and for sevens players, just to give them something to play. If I'll ask you, if you had to take or leave sevens or this, what would you take or leave?
Oh, I think sevens is a better game. For sure. Sevens is a better game.
That would be my suspicion. It's a bit goofy. As far as claims that it's going to crack the American market or be the future of the game, I would.
No, Bill. No, that's not what's going to happen. But as an isolated tournament in a COVID year, excited. Like Bermuda is a great place to do it. Bringing rugby there, it's a good spectacle in that regard. So definitely a lot of merit to the tens game.
Awesome.
And then with that, we will look at club rugby once more. We will continue our coverage of Super Rugby Unlocked, which has produced some banging games. Round 4 obviously coming up this weekend. We'll just look at round 3 results, because round 3 there was one game postponed, which was the Lions and the Cheetahs.
That's right,
That was COVID cases, and it was ruled out, so that's going to have to be replayed. But 2 games did go ahead. We had the Pumas and the Stormers, an absolutely banging game in Umbrella Stadium.
This game, man. It's been so long since this game, but this left a scar on me, this game.
It really did. It was 42-37 to the Stormers at the very bitter end, but not before the Pumas had racked up a 37-14 lead. Before absolutely floodgates opened in the last 10 minutes, really. But there's some of the talking points from it. The Pumas looked great at the beginning. They were team possessed. Every play was brilliant. Eddie Fouche from 10 pulling the strings, dropping
looking
it on the
so
toe.
confident.
Every kick, the right one, every pass, excellent.
I remember I think midway through the first half I was like sitting back going, how long before we talk about Eddie Fouche in a Springbok 10 conversation?
Because he was looking that good. Unfortunately, it was ended far too soon.
It hasn't made, bizarrely, obviously there's not too many people watching the Super Rugby Unlocked out of South Africa, because it made virtually no headlines, but he had one of the most horrific injuries I've ever seen. It was just it was an awful reminder of the brutality of the sport.
The game can get very violent. And we were saying about Fouche when they were playing the Cheetahs in week 1, that he was maybe not coping with that level of physicality and speed, whereas in week 2 against the Griquas he looked excellent, and then here against a sluggish Stormers he was pulling the strings, but he got himself into the poach position and his leg got landed on by a big clean out and snapped off. It was horrible, grisly viewing, and actually probably more noteworthy from the Springbok point of view, although the Springboks aren't going to be playing, Sia Khaleesi also picked up an injury in a similar capacity. He was over the ball, getting cleaned
didn't look
out.
Good either for
didn't
Sia.
Look great either, but it was the Fouche one was one of the nastier ones you'll ever see on a rugby pitch.
And then of course from that winning position, despite some great performances from other guys in the team like Van de Bank at 12, and even Rudolph, who did end up getting yellow carded.
Andre Rudolph, he was everywhere before that yellow, and he still played well, but despite those brave efforts, they couldn't quite get it done. The floodgates opened in the second half. In the second half of the second half, the Stormers woke up a little, enough to run.
I think it was 37-14 with 20 minutes to go.
It was, that was
42-37 finish. They were absolutely done. The Pumas by the end of it, and just an absolute. It was a bit of a gutting one. As much as you appreciate the Stormers coming back, that's fine. But it was just the narrative of the game as well. Seeing an underdog team play so well, and then seeing their star player go off like that and then they lose the game. It's not the stuff of great stories.
He did get given. I saw that the Super Rugby YouTube channel gave him Play of the Week for the little chip over the top that was gathered by Rudolph, and then the switch play to Van der Bank. Actually, all three men combining for a beautiful try. Just an example of some of the things Fuchs could do. He's only 23, which I learned. Upon looking at him, he has a big beard. He looks like he could have been 30 years old or something near retirement, and I was fearing that it could have been a career-ending injury. Hopefully not. He's 23. He's a young man. Hopefully he comes back.
So bad, though.
It
so
was
bad.
definitely a bad one.
When the leg snaps like that, like I don't know.
Hopefully
not for a while yet.
No, we won't. He's certainly ruled out for the rest of Super Rugby Unlocked, which leaves the Pumas in rather a sticky situation.
A sad situation. Yeah,
for sure. But then the other game, which is obviously more shocking, I watched this one. The Bulls 41. Sharks 14.
What happened there?
Oh, I'll tell you what happened there. Up at Loftus Versfeld, the Sharks were awful.
Right.
Awful. Everything they did was terrible. It was like unbelievable. A mighty display from the Bulls. Their Springboks really stood up. You were saying before that this competition has really been a story of Springboks v non-Springboks. You can see in each team their Springbok being just the cut above some of the players around him, and the Bulls have a lot of Springboks, so it made very little sense that they were playing such shoddy rugby for a lot of the first 2 weeks. And this time they played what Bulls rugby should be about. They were crisp even in the wide channels. They managed to take some tries clinically, but the likes of Dwayne Vermeulen were just dominant in every area. But to be honest, they didn't need to do that much. This is the other thing. Like they took a few tries pretty well, but the Sharks had most of the ball and could do nothing with it. They managed to compound errors. Their set piece was appalling. They couldn't win a line out at all. And by the end, they had a 22. I think they had a penalty at around 20 meters out, and they shaped to kick the corner, and Curran Bosch did a little goofy tap and go thing and got turned over from the next play because they couldn't go to the line out. They kept losing their own line out. I've never seen the Sharks play so badly. It was shocking.
They tend to be a very well organised team, but by the sounds of things, it was basket case city.
Is the one little nugget of semi-positivity, I would think. He had a lovely little quick tap 22 that he duped a bull into diving for and scooped it up and turned and went, and that was nice, but then he offloaded it and the guy dropped the ball. So it was just error strewn is not even the right way to put it. Like, the Sharks were abysmal, but the Bulls were very, very physical and very tidy, and Van Sale actually looked very good. Him and Stain were pulling the strings and set a nice pace for them. And then Stedman Gans from 13, he had one absolutely lovely try with a load of footwork, and he actually got a brace for himself, as did Van Staden. They were comprehensively the better team on the day and have slingshotted themselves up into first in the table overall because the Cheetahs didn't play. So they're sitting on 10 points as a result of it. Very impressive from the Bulls. I had a feeling that despite my not loving their gameplay a lot of the time, just the fact that they have so many Springboks and they're that physical, they'll be a tough nut to crack, and they might be in contention. And sure enough, that's where they are right now. They're sitting at first after the third round.
Interesting. In terms of what's coming up this week, we have the Lions against the Griquas. Griquas returning after their bad loss to the Pumas, and the Lions obviously having had COVID cases do finally get to have a home game this week, assuming it can go ahead. A game that the Lions should be looking to win. They are a better team than the Griquas, and they move the ball very nicely.
Up at altitude against the more amateur team as well. You'd expect the last 20 minutes to be a bit of a hard one for the Griquas to do 100%, anything.
100%. That's taking place at 7 p.m. Irish time on Friday, October 30th. That's tomorrow evening. From where we are, the Pumas and the Sharks are playing a game out that's going to be hosted by the Pumas in Mombela Stadium. That's obviously Saturday, and the Bulls are taking on the Stormers in Loftus in the game of the weekend on Saturday as well. Do you have any thoughts on how those are going to go? Obviously the Sharks Pumas takes an interesting look to it. Obviously two teams reeling a little bit.
Really, I find it tough to see the Pumas succeeding without Fuchs, to be honest. And I think the Sharks will have a retaliatory performance because they really
think they
I can't overstate how bad they were. Like they had, it was Nkosi was back for them, which was great, and he had glimpses, but they couldn't find him with the ball in hand. They couldn't string the passes along the back line.
There's been a lot of change. There's been a lot of turnover in terms of that squad as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Perhaps it's finally
actually concerns about Werner. Yeah, Werner Koch on the other wing, who's like exciting. He's very good in many areas. Sevens legend. He can't field a high ball to save his life. He keeps running after it without looking up, and then looking up and realizing he's not under it, and then meanwhile the guy's catching it. Like it was, from top to bottom it was bad last week, but I'd expect a response, and they are a better team than the Pumas on balance.
And Bulls Stormers in Loftus, by the sounds of things, the Bulls are going to romp this. Is that what you're saying?
It's tough to see the Stormers getting it off in Loftus without Khaleesi as well. What I will say is the Bulls have been a bit sloppy at times, and I don't expect the Stormers to be as bad as the Sharks were.
Yeah.
Certainly the Stormers were sluggish enough against the Pumas as well. They needed a response too, but they managed to get that win, and you'd think it's kind of teed up for them to try and take on this tournament and get this Super Rugby Unlocked win. But the Bulls at home, they definitely showed something last week. The Stedman Gans lighting it up from centre is really good. Points of optimism, because they were lacking a little with their multi-phase penetration. So hopefully the Bulls can crack on from there. But it's definitely the game of the weekend, I think, is Bulls Stormers, two proper teams with title contention, in title contention with title aspirations, going at it in Loftus. Awesome. It should be a good spectacle.
That's the one to watch. I'm sure, I didn't actually have the time here, but I'm sure it's clashing with Ireland-France.
Probably.
So, for all of their madness. But we will try and find a way to watch it. Listen, moving on.
Yes, absolutely. With that, we will get to the... Oh, is that where we're at? Oh yes, sorry,
that's where we're at.
Rugby.
Yes, just a quick little roundup. The Pro 14 is up and running. Just a reminder that this stuff is still going on in terms of domestic rugby. Pro 14 is up and running. The very last South Africa free season that the Pro 14 will be having. The current narrative through 3 rounds is that the Irish sides continue to dominate on the boys, as we'd say.
Yes, both Munster and Leinster unbeaten going into week 3.
Ulster. There's one defeat in 3 rounds for the 4 Irish provinces. They have one defeat between them,
and that was Connacht.
That was Connacht in one game, and Connacht have been brilliant as well, playing excellent rugby. So the Irish teams topping the billing so far in the Pro 14, but only through 3 rounds there is time for things to change. And, and the other interesting thing that's going on in Pro 14 is that they're debuting Monday night rugby.
Yes, Munster faced Cardiff in the first of several Monday night fixtures that are going on.
There's a few of them next week as well.
Yeah, it's a good option, particularly next week when you have the Super Saturday and the Six Nations. You just push it out.
In the COVID world, and it makes sense when you've no fans in there, just to move it out to get eyes on your game, stop the games from clashing, and get good TV views, hopefully boost the views.
Something Super Rugby Unlocked could have learned from, to be honest. Why are you scheduling your games at the same time as the Six Nations deciders?
Internally focused, I guess.
And
yes, the other tournament still going on at the moment is the Top 14, which is managed to rack up 6 rounds already. So they're heading into round 7 already, and so far Ronan O'Gara's La Rochelle are top of the log.
That's right.
They are tied on 18 points with Toulouse and Clermont.
Interesting
to see Ronan O'Gara's La Rochelle finally
clicking. I'm delighted with that. I have a lot of faith in Rog as a rugby brain, and it'd be nice to see some Irish coaching talent kind of come through from that great generation, and more power to him. Plus I like La Rochelle.
Yes, indeed.
I suppose with that, do we move on? Is that all we say?
Do.
Yeah, so that was European domestic rugby, such as it is. And we'll wrap up the podcast with our News of the Week segment. There is a bit of news this week. Probably the main news is that the Champions Cup draw is finalised. Finally finalised.
Yeah,
so it is. Dizzying viewing, though, it makes, because it's 2 pools of 12 teams. For whatever reason, I don't even know what was the rationale for it.
I guess it's just because they play fewer games. So the idea is you play fewer games against fewer teams. So there's less cross contamination, I guess.
Yeah.
All of it higgledy-piggledy. But with 24 teams in the comp, it makes it very strange. The teams were ranked in terms of tier. There were tiered teams in each league, and now there's a pool draw. And in your pool, so for example, Leinster are a tier 1 team.
Yes.
They play the 2 tier 4 teams, the bottom tier, in their pool who aren't also in their league, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So they play one Tier 4 team from the top Couture and one Tier 4 team from the Premiership, and that goes the same for everybody. So if you're in the top Couture and you're Tier 2, you play the Tier 3 teams
that are
from
your league,
the Premiership and the Pro 14,
yes.
and such that it goes. And in that context, some teams have obviously fared better than others from a Leinster point of view. Getting Northampton and Montpellier is just fine.
Yes.
And I have to say, from Bordeaux-Bègles, who I think are a coming force and took Europe seriously that year and finished in the top tier of the top Coutures,
yes.
Now have a draw where they have Northampton and Dragons as their two teams.
Do they face Northampton? Oh, they do. Yeah.
Northampton and Dragons, and they're going to be in a healthy spot. They're going to get to the quarters at least, and I think Bordeaux are one of the teams to watch. Yeah. And one of the uglier draws was for Exeter, who actually ended up
Toulouse.
They got Toulouse and Gloucester. It's not the easiest draw for them by any stretch.
No.
Not Gloucester. Gloucester in their league. Toulouse and Glasgow.
Yeah,
that's tough.
Those are two tough teams for the double champions to be taking on.
Not pretty.
So it's
the other nasty one was Connacht, who I was hoping to get a nicer draw than they got. Bristol and Racing. Oh,
mind you. All
great
games for the neutral. Connacht v Bristol, Bristol v Racing, Racing v Connacht. All of those are great fixtures. So there's some great teams in this comp as well. It's still the Champions Cup. It's still going to be phenomenal. You still expect the usual suspects to turn up in the knockout stages.
And it'll kick off in December.
It's kicking off in December. So it's slightly different for COVID reasons, different setup, but it's just good to have them finally finalised.
Yeah, we have another bit of news. Steve Hansen is pivoting to Rugby League, the traitor. He's got a job with NRL outfit, the Canterbury Bulldogs, in a high-performance consultancy role, which I just thought was slightly interesting. Big Steve get back into the coaching game in league.
Yes. I would also make a mention of Warren Gatland in terms of the things. He was making news for just muddying the waters as far as someone was putting the question to him as to who could be the Lions captain,
right.
And then he just listed off a shopping list of names that included like Stuart McAnally, Stuart Hogg, Johnny Sexton, Conor Murray, Maro Itoje, Jamie George, Mako Vunipola was in there for some reason. Joe Launchbury was also included. Even
did he include Peter O'Mahony?
He could have included anyone. Like, I don't know. It was a shopping list of it. It was just him doing his classic media stuff. But I thought it was funny enough to be worthy of a mention in our other news, because I think he has some cheek about him, considering he's gone 0 whatever in this year.
I know he's back out of New Zealand, and he can be his old cocky self as well. Something about New Zealand, he just doesn't. They don't love him over there, and he doesn't like that.
Yeah.
So he's happier in Europe for some reason. Listen, final story of the day before we wrap up the monster show that has been, and it's sort of a somber note to end on, but Wales and Lions legend JJ Williams has passed away, age 72.
Yeah.
And Williams was one of the absolute greats in terms of winger play. He was a part of that great Welsh and Lions teams of the 70s, and their high flying winger, playing with the likes of JP Williams and Gareth Edwards and Phil Bennett, and he was one of the many. Like, he had some sensational records to read. He had 12 tries for Wales. He won Grand Slams in 1976 and 78, as well as 4 Triple Crowns in that era. When they were just dominant in terms of the side. And he also had really made his name for himself in the Lions tours of South Africa in 74 and New Zealand in 77. His try scoring exploits have reached the record books, as I've been reading today. He equaled David Duckham's record of 6 tries in a single Lions game during a 97-0 victory over Southwest Districts in 1974 in South Africa. 6 tries in a game.
That's seriously impressive.
He went on to score 4 tries in the 3-0 test series that the Lions won on the Invincibles.
Absolute legend,
so listen, our thoughts are obviously with him, and legendary player, and obviously sorry to see
a little loss for the game, for sure. So with that little somber note to end, R.I.P. JJ. But yes, that is our show. It has been another marathon one.
It has.
Because the fixtures list kind of demanded. Hopefully
we will
ease off as the Six Nations wraps up, but in the meantime,
yes,
what can you do but go talk about and do these games justice? For those who've stuck with us, fair play. Again, you have more stamina than we do.
Yes.
If you're in it for the long haul as it is, I hope you enjoy Super Saturday, the weekend of rugby to come. And if you do enjoy our coverage of it as well, please do like, subscribe and share with your friends, and leave a comment down below as well. Yes. We do enjoy hearing your takes on things.
We absolutely do. Listen, all the best, guys. Take care. Okay.
Alright, you're up.
Oh, right and wide, and I've moved the lens on you, so I have. Oh, dear me. That was on me.